Good morning. We will call to order the April 8th, 2014 meeting of the Indian River County Board of County Commissioners. At this point, I'd like to invite the Clerk of the Circuit Court and Comptroller, Mr. Jeff Smith, to come up and lead us in the vocation, followed by the Pledge of Allegiance led by County Attorney Dylan Reingold. Would everybody please stand and join me? And Mr. Smith, welcome.
Thank you, Chairman. Let us pray. Our dear Heavenly Father, we thank you for this time that we can meet and to do the business of your business in this county. Lord, as we enter the Easter season, we just ask that we follow your example and serve others the most humble and fervent way that we can. And Lord, as my son is about ready to deploy early, Lord, just keep all of our armed forces in your arms and protect them, Lord, wherever they're at around the world. And dedicate us to your service. These things we pray in your name. Amen.
Amen. Amen. Amen.
Please face the flag and join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I
pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Under additions and deletions to the agenda, we've had a request from staff to add an item under 12I2, which deals with the consultant for All Aboard Florida. And we have a request from Commissioner Solari to add an item under his matters, 14D2, which is a letter to legislators regarding All Aboard Florida. Is there any other changes or additions to the agenda?
Move as amended. Second.
We have a motion from Commissioner Solari, second from Commissioner Davis. All in favor signify with aye.
Aye.
Is there any opposed? That carries unanimously. Taking us to proclamations and presentations. We first have a presentation of a proclamation designating the month of April 2014 as Child Abuse and Neglect Awareness and Prevention Month. And this will be presented by Commissioner Flesher. And I think we have a contingent here to accept it. So y'all come on up. You can come to either podium if you like.
No, the whole team.
Come on up. Don't be shy.
The whole team. You work hard throughout the year. Thank you.
Commissioner Flesher.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Today I have the opportunity to present this proclamation. It's one that is presented with mixed emotions. I truly believe that this proclamation brings public awareness, but it's one that I truly wish that we didn't have to read. And one day I hope that this cause is in the history books, in the faint memories of all, that we don't have to be concerned about child abuse and neglect. Unfortunately, it exists. And we're fortunate enough to have a team of professionals and volunteers to address this issue with awareness and address it so that it does not happen, or at least enhance the likelihood that prevention is known to all. Thank you. This proclamation reads as follows, designating the month of April 2014 as Child Abuse and Neglect Awareness and Prevention Month. Whereas Indian River County's future prosperity depends upon the nurturing of healthy development of children currently living, growing, and learning with our many diverse communities. Whereas research shows that safe and nurturing relationships, stimulating and stable environments improve brain development and child well-being, while neglectful or abusive experiences and unstable or stressful environments increase the odds of poor childhood outcomes. Whereas the abuse and neglect of children can cause severe, costly, and lifelong problems affecting all of society, including physical and mental health problems, school failure, and criminal behavior. And whereas research also shows that parents and caregivers who have social networks and know how to help in times of trouble are more resilient and better able to provide safe environments and nurturing experiences for their children. And whereas individuals, businesses, schools, and faith-based and community organizations must make the child a top priority and take action to support the physical, social, emotional, and educational development and the competency of all children. Whereas the Children's Bureau within the United States Department of Health and Human Services recognizes the importance of providing healthy, nurturing environments for our nation's youth by funding the National Child Abuse Prevention Month. And whereas Healthy Families, Whole Child Indian River, and Connected for Kids Coalition work together to promote awareness of and prevent child abuse and neglect. Now therefore be it proclaimed by the Board of County Commissioners of Indian River County, Florida, that the Board designates the month of April 2014 as Child Abuse and Neglect Awareness and Prevention Month, and calls upon all citizens to engage in awareness and prevention activities that are designed to make our community healthier and safer for all children. Duly adopted this 8th day of April 2014, signed by all 5 county commissioners. Thank you, ladies.
Thank you much.
Team?
Beth Dingy from Healthy Families. On behalf of Healthy Families and Whole Child and Connected for Kids, I wanted to express our appreciation at recognizing the importance of preventing child abuse and neglect. Collectively, as advocates for children in Indian River County, we all recognize that a child's first relationships and earliest experiences lay the foundation for health and well-being across their entire lifespan. In the time it took me to read that short paragraph, a child was abused in the United States. By the time this meeting is concluded, a child will die. And by the time we lay our heads on our pillows tonight, another 4 will be murdered at the hands of a parent or caregiver. These would-be astronauts, chemists, doctors, lawyers, mechanics, hairdressers, or perhaps county commissioners have not lost their lives in vain if we continue to focus on providing our community with the tools to prevent child abuse and neglect. This proclamation is much more than the lives that have been lost. This proclamation is about altering the future for the youth of today and the youth of tomorrow. Prevention and awareness are the first steps to a better tomorrow for Indian River County's youth. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Did you want to just go ahead and introduce your team there? Just
Absolutely.
give them their moment in the sunshine. Step up.
Jacqueline Warrior, Connected for Kids co-chair.
Claudia Jimenez, Connected for Kids co-chair.
Kelly Williams, Whole Child Executive Director.
Kathleen Kane, Executive Director of Healthy Start.
Great.
Mr. Chairman, in my time in law enforcement in both jurisdictions, I do know that law enforcement plays a major role in addressing child abuse and neglect as we're called upon, but many organizations are part of that response, and while they are paid professional associations and teams, there's a special place that I've learned for other organizations and professionals and volunteer organizations that address this issue in a what I'd say a more encapsulated fashion. And I just want to say thank you for all that you do, because when you respond to a scene, it's very difficult to be everything you need to be at that specific time. At no other time do I see the application of it takes a village to raise a child than in this instance, where the resources come and we can divert and then address the issue. So thank you, ladies.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Ladies, come on up here. Do the handshake thing, and then we'll have you stand here and get a picture.
Got to run the gauntlet first.
Thanks, Claudia. Good to see you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thanks, Kelly. Good to see
And the
you.
last one takes
Jackie, how are you? Good to see you.
Good morning again.
Again, hello, hello.
Come
Yeah.
down today.
Hello.
Great to see you again, Doctor. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Who's their
Yeah,
photo?
why don't y'all, Claudia, have you
Down to the middle?
come right over here? Yeah. Get right here in the middle. Take a step to your right there, ladies. Just one big step. Your other right, Jack.
I've heard that one.
Everybody smile. Good morning. Great. Thank you all.
It's like when we told Bob to take a step to the left, he didn't know what to do.
I know.
Oh, I get it. Took me a minute.
Next is a presentation of the Enterprise Zone Annual Report by Helene Castletime, the Economic Development Director for Indian River County Chamber of Commerce. It says here Chris Russell is supposed to be with you, but I see you have Beth Mitchell, which is a vast improvement over Chris. So, Beth, did you want to come up with Helene, or you're good? Okay. Helene, welcome. Good morning.
Thank you. Thank you. Good morning, Commissioners. For the record, Helene Castletine, Economic Development Director with the Indian River County Chamber of Commerce, and unfortunately Chris Russell, who serves as the chairman of the Enterprise Zone Development Agency, was not able to make the meeting this morning due to scheduling conflicts. And I am here this morning to give an overview about the Enterprise Zone, some of the accomplishments we've seen over the past fiscal year. And I'll do this one. There we go. The ultimate goal of the Enterprise Zone program is to encourage private investment in otherwise high poverty, high unemployment areas. That's the overall goal. A little bit about the history. The program in Florida began in 1982. Florida was one of the first states in the United States to have an Enterprise Zone program such as this. It's currently administered by the Florida Department of Economic Opportunity. Designation does require legislative approval, and it offers certain tax advantages to businesses that are located in the Enterprise Zone. Our particular Enterprise Zone, which is a collaboration between the City of Vero Beach and Indian River County, was designated in October of 2005. We pursued the designation as a way to get our largest private employer, Piper Aircraft, back up and operating after the 2004 hurricanes, and it worked. There currently are 63 enterprise zones in Florida, some considered urban, some are rural. We are considered an urban enterprise zone. Within our region, there are enterprise zones in Fort Pierce, Palm Bay, Indiantown. The entire county of Okeechobee is an enterprise zone. This shows a map, of course, a little bit hard to see, but just to show you that there are enterprise zones that encompass pretty much the entire state of Florida. Some counties have multiple enterprise zone designations. Our local enterprise zone encompasses about a 4.7 square mile area that includes the Vero Beach Municipal Airport as well as the adjacent Gifford community. The City of Fellsmere has requested inclusion in our enterprise zone. Our Enterprise Zone Development Agency has supported that request. Again, that has to be approved through the Florida legislature. Several years ago, with the help of your Public Works Department, we put up signs throughout the Enterprise Zone, the entryways into the Enterprise Zone area, to show people that they're entering an Enterprise Zone, to make people more aware that the program does exist, and that happens to be my office phone number on there. Very quickly, to go through some of the benefits of a business locating in the Enterprise Zone. When they purchase new equipment that is used in the Enterprise Zone, they can apply for sales tax refunds on that sales tax that was paid on that equipment. Also, sales tax refund on building materials. If they construct a new facility or make a major improvement on an existing facility, they can apply for a sales tax refund on those building materials. When a company in the Enterprise Zone adds a new job, creates a new job, they can apply for a credit on either their corporate tax bill or their Florida sales tax liability. There's also a property tax credit that is based, again, on new job creation. About 2 years ago, the City of Vero Beach approved a 50% municipal tax exemption on electricity for companies that are new to the Enterprise Zone. And then there's also a community contribution tax credit, which is a little bit different, and that's benefits the nonprofits that serve the Enterprise Zone and the residents of the Enterprise Zone. Oftentimes, when a company is applying for any type of incentive to locate into an enterprise zone, be it a local incentive or a state incentive, oftentimes there are bonuses attached to that for a project that goes into an enterprise zone. The Chamber's role, I serve as the Enterprise Zone Coordinator. We are designated through your office as the primary economic development organization. I help with Laura Vasquez, your assistant, Commissioner Flesher, to coordinate the monthly EZDA meetings. They meet the first Thursday every month at 8:30 in the morning. We have a meeting this week, or second Thursday, excuse me. We conduct workshops. I meet with new businesses, with existing businesses, to help them understand the program and to fill out the forms as they request these refunds or tax credits. We address legislative issues and process the refund requests. I am happy to announce that we have 2 new board members on the Enterprise Zone Development Agency. Ms. Linda Morgan, who is a resident of the Enterprise Zone and I believe is in the audience this morning. Glad to have her here. And also Mark St. Vincent, who works at Piper Aircraft, is a new member of our EZDA. We do promote the enterprise zone as we promote the county for new business and for the expansion of existing business through trade shows, ad placements, working closely with our partners at Enterprise Florida, the statewide economic development organization, and continue to build relationships with our existing businesses as well as site selectors and others as needed. We do collaborate with other organizations throughout the county and throughout the region, county and the city, of course, other civic organizations such as the Progressive Civic League of Gifford, Career Source Research Coast. We worked with them to place their mobile unit in Gifford, which is now there every Wednesday from 8:30 until 4 over at the Gifford Youth Activity Center, so it can be closer to those job seekers. Enterprise Florida, the governor's office, and also we reach out to other enterprise zone coordinators throughout the state. We did this just over the past 6 months as the enterprise zone program was being considered for sunset review. We reached out to my colleagues throughout Florida to come up with a plan to make sure that this program continues for another 10 years. As an aside, we're told that this legislation that it will be discussed during the next session, because it is up for sunset review on December 31st, 2015, and we're told that it'll be discussed during the 2015 legislative session. Just a few photos, workshops. Again, the Career Source Research Coast mobile unit over at GYAC. I did want to point out there is no state or local funding allocated to the Enterprise Zone program. All the refund requests are processed through the Florida Department of Revenue, and local taxes are not affected by this program. Any sales tax refund or sales tax credit does not affect the local 1% that we have collected here in Indian River County. Just to go through some of the accomplishments over the past fiscal year, we did assist 10 prospective businesses as well as existing business owners, either walking them through the program, explaining it, helping them fill out the forms. I conducted 2 workshops, and of course, as I do public speaking to other civic groups, we always promote the Enterprise Zone program to those groups as well. Over the past fiscal year, 119 jobs were filled. Some of those were new positions, many were existing positions. There was a capital investment in the enterprise zone of over $500,000. We also tracked the SHIP loans, the State Housing Initiative Program, which provides down payment and closing cost assistance. And there were 10 of the SHIP loans processed for a little over $8,000. And as I'd mentioned earlier, collaborating with our Enterprise Zone colleagues throughout the state for legislative awareness about the sunsetting of this particular program. I just wanted to mention some of the companies that are located in the Enterprise Zone. As I had mentioned, Piper Aircraft, of course. Girard Equipment, the president of Girard Equipment, Tim Girard, gave a brief presentation to our Enterprise Zone Development Agency at our February meeting, and he commented how he really tries and goes out of his way to hire Enterprise Zone residents when he has new positions to fill, which I think is very admirable.
If I could interrupt you on that, how could we make it so that he doesn't have to go out of his way for that? How could is there? Because I applaud those efforts, I really do. And, Mr. George's a great guy, and very involved in the community. We're fortunate to have him here doing business, but. For all businesses in that is not have an answer now, but so they don't have to go out their way to make it as easy as possible to do exactly what the enterprise zone is designed to do. I just keep that in the back of your mind. We'll follow up with it one day.
Sure. And I know Career Source, Research Coast, will be working with them a little bit closer to work with other companies throughout the Enterprise Zone, too, to make sure that they're aware of, if they hire Enterprise Zone residents, that there are certain tax credits that they might apply for when doing so. So we'll be, focusing a little bit more on that as well. Dragonfly Boatworks over in aviation has hired, I believe, 3 new people. There's a Family Dollar store that's being proposed in the Enterprise Zone, the corner of 43rd Avenue and 45th Street, which I think will be really a good addition to the Enterprise Zone, making it easier for residents to access the store as well as potential new hires. Several of our packing houses have utilized the program. I put Walgreens up on 53rd Street. They're at the northern end of the Enterprise Zone. And when I worked with this program in Collier County for the Immokalee Enterprise Zone program, I met with a Walgreens representative, and he told me specifically that the corporation, seeks out Enterprise Zone locations because they know there are certain tax benefits attributed to that program. So that was interesting to note. So that is the end of my presentation, and if you all have any questions, I'd be happy to answer them, and we appreciate your support.
Commissioner Davis?
Yes. Helene, any idea where, if I'm not mistaken, we were up to be renewed for the Enterprise Zone, or the whole legislation statewide, I believe it was?
Right.
How's that going through the halls of Congress?
As we understand it, it'll be taken up again in the 2015 legislative session, and you're right, our local Enterprise Zone will be up for sunset review as well. The statewide program as well as our local Enterprise Zone program.
So that's next year then?
Yes.
Okay, I thought it was this year. All right, great.
Initially it had been.
Okay. All right.
Just to follow up on a little bit, when I was up with the chamber group in Tallahassee, we had a presentation from a DEO member, and what the Enterprise Zones are running into is, I guess, statewide, some of them have not been quite stellar operations, and so there was a little bit of the legislature pushback on them in beginning. And then the DEO did a kind of review of all their incentive programs that they offer, the quick closing account and these other ones. And all those other incentives had some very positive return on investment ratios, 2 or 3 to 1, so $2 or $3 return for every dollar in the incentive, and I think one of them was even up to like $8 or $9 ROI. The Enterprise Zones, what they calculated were 0.98 ratio, so they're not even kind of quite break even. So there is some headwinds, I would say, is what we heard, in what the legislature is looking at to get these renewed. And I think over the course of the next years, what we need to do is work with our legislative delegation ahead of time and point out that ours is a good working enterprise zone. We do have positive ROIs, and if they don't renew it, statewide for everybody, at least be selective and renew some of those that are working well. So,
did you say what ours was?
I don't think, have we done that analysis on our ROI?
To a limited degree. One of the things that was pointed out when the governor's office had done a report on the Enterprise Zone program, they said that property values had not increased through the Enterprise Zone program.
Oh, duh.
Well, exactly.
Right.
I did do a study on our property values in Indian River County, and in fact, they had increased within the Enterprise Zone.
Yeah. Okay.
So, We'll be working with Enterprise Florida. Enterprise Florida has put together a task force of Enterprise Zone coordinators. I'm on that task force. We believe that the program will probably stay alive, but there'll be some major changes made to it, and that's what we'll be working on over the course of the next year, is to work with our legislators as well as our local elected officials to see what we can come up with, what changes, how can we tweak it, how can we make it a little bit more user-friendly, but also that entities such as those that Commissioner O'Brien mentioned can't utilize the program in the way it was not intended, let's put it that way.
Also, one of the things, new businesses, I'm going to say new improvements, Oculina Bank is going to be moving in right there where the old La Fonda restaurant was. The city is in the process of tearing that down, and they're going to put in a drive-through and a brand-new bank right there. So
that's tremendous.
Yeah.
That'd be a tremendous asset for that area. One of the other things I would be remiss in not pointing out, recognizing Commissioner Solari, who is our liaison on the Enterprise Zone Development Agency, and we appreciate his support and his input as we move along. But we do intend to work closely with Enterprise Florida and our legislators to make sure that this program stays alive. One of the things, as Commissioner O'Brien mentioned, the other programs are true incentives. There's the quote-unquote but-for clause, that but for this incentive, a company would not choose that location. The enterprise zone is not that type of an incentive. If a company moves into the enterprise zone, then they are eligible to apply for these tax credits and tax refunds. So it's a little bit different in terms of return on investment, but certainly we'll be looking into that much more thoroughly.
In the event the legislature does look at, knowing how it probably is going to wind up, they'll probably penalize the ones that are working and keep the ones that don't. But in the event they do that multiplier effect that we're talking about, maybe the best thing for us to do is to move very hard in the direction of, okay, whatever, let's just say ours is 2.5 or whatever, just pick one, get that to be the threshold of the bar and make sure that we're above that. So we might really need to focus in on that ROI to be, and look at anything we can do to help out with that. I'd love to be a part of it.
Okay, appreciate that. Thank you.
Commissioner Zork.
Yes. Do you know where we stand on having the name Fellsmere added to our enterprise zone eligible areas? I know that was one of the items that we had that we were working on.
Right. I believe that's going to be taken up in next year's session as well.
Okay.
I don't think there was any legislation filed during this session.
Okay.
I know our legislator, Representative Mayfield, was supportive of that effort,
sure. Right.
But I believe it will be considered during the next session in 2015.
And I think one thing when you look at how the ROI is calculated is you have to factor in the cost that the state bureaucracy adds into the cost of the program. So sometimes if you have more participants, it can increase your ROI because it breaks down the fixed operating cost that they apply to the program. And if you have a lower level number of participants, it can skew the numbers in a way that if there was more participation, the ROI would be higher if the fixed operating costs were the same.
Right.
Thanks.
Okay. Wayne, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Appreciate it. That takes us to the approval of the minutes of March 4, 2014.
Move approval. Second.
We have a motion from Commissioner Flesher, second from Commissioner Davis. All in favor signify with aye.
Aye.
Is there any opposed? That carries unanimously. There's no informational items, so we move to the consent agenda. Gentlemen, anybody wish to pull a consent agenda item?
Yes, Mr. Chairman. I'd like to pull item B and C, please.
B and C?
Bravo, C, Charlie.
Okay, we have B and C pulled. Anyone else?
I have a question. Is the emergency item that's added under the consultant tied into item E?
Yes.
It is, but we're appropriating the money first, and then we're awarding the consultant next. In other words, we made the money available for the consultant in that budget amendment, and then the item also awards it to the consultant because we want to get someone
right,
on board
as soon
meeting.
as possible.
Yeah. So they do tie together in that respect.
Okay, so would it make sense to pull E and the emergency item, do those together in a particular order, or just leave this one where it's at?
I thought it would be, we thought of it professionally this way. We appropriate the money here.
Okay.
And then we
and
award.
Then deal with the award. So, okay, that's
the money
fine.
then is appropriated.
And the budget amendment does include the amount under the emergency item, so we don't have to change the budget amendment, so we're good there. Okay, so we'll leave E under consent.
Okay.
Commissioner Zork, is that good with you? Okay. Gentlemen, anything else?
Move as amended.
Second.
We have a motion from Commissioner Flesher, second from Commissioner Davis. Is there anyone from the public that wishes to have a consent agenda item pulled for additional discussion?
Over here. Mr. Chairman.
Please come up and speak to the podium. We could have your name and address, please, for the record.
Sure. My name is Patricia Hunt, and I have a P.O. Box, 442 Roseland, Florida. I have resided in Indian River County for over 15 years. I have worked for a lot of families on the beach side, and I know a lot of families who come in and out of town in this county. I was raised in a Catholic church, Irish Catholic, and that may not mean anything to a lot of people, but it means something to me. My parents were married 60 years.
Can we know what item we're talking about?
Is there a specific
There's
item?
a specific
on the consent
item.
agenda?
It's access to public records. I have had a court case pending since 2007. I have been denied over 497 days access to records. I've written the governor's office, the attorney general. I'm not the only one.
From us? Let me
From
do this.
the county and the clerk of court and a specific lieutenant who have violated certain federal laws, 18 U.S.C.
Ms.
1503.
Hunt, hang on just a minute for me, okay, please. Let me do this. With the board's consensus, I would like to see, the board will say, go ahead and allow you to be added under public discussion items, because what you're talking about really isn't on our consent agenda.
Okay.
So I'd like to kind of move forward with that, and if the board is willing, we'll go ahead and add you under public discussion and give you some time then.
We'll move that, Mr. Chairman.
Be right after this.
Okay, that's great.
It won't be much longer.
And I want to thank you for meeting with me, Commissioner O'Brien.
Okay.
I know how busy you are, so thank
Commissioner
you.
Slory and Zork, are you okay with that?
Yeah.
Okay, so we'll add Mrs. Hunt
Certainly.
as
great.
item 10B3. Okay? So with that, is there anyone else from the public that has a consent agenda item that they wish to pull for further discussion? Okay, seeing none, we have a motion from Commissioner Flesher, second Commissioner Davis. All in favor signify with aye.
Aye.
Is there any opposed? That carries 5-0. Commissioner Davis, item B.
Yes, Mr. Chairman. This is doing a little bit of, I'm going to say online, but I'd like to for everybody's benefit, where I really have a little bit of an issue with this is as much as in our surplus policy, we have right now an RFP where we do the public outcry auction. In addition to surplus property, we have done some sealed bids on some properties that, for example, the Fleming Estate, and then also on some other surplus items we have. We do a sealed bid, for example, on the brass out at the shooting range, and those barrels of brass. They've gotten quite a demand for them, and one of the things that concerns me about this is not necessarily the procedure, it's what may happen after the procedure or adding up to the procedure. For example, whenever there is a vehicle that is sold, I've had it happen to me personally that if a title is left open and the law enforcement for some reason winds up towing that vehicle, impounding that vehicle, and ultimately the way that the tow company is reimbursed for their fees that is just left from a vehicle that's left on the side of the road is they literally attach it to your license, and when you get ready to renew your license, you have to take care of that. The only way around that is, for example, if I were to sell you a vehicle and I sign the title and do the paperwork and I hand it to you, then if you do not register that, that is considered that open title. That's literally happened to me before. I got ready to renew my license, and there was like a $300 fee associated with what I had to get taken care of. The way you get around that, or the way you take care of that, is you fill out an affidavit and take it down to the tax collector's office, and you say, here, I sold this. I don't know if this person's ever going to renew this, not going to tag this vehicle or not, but here it is. In that process, that is a part of, there's several things that we have that is in place with the current process that we have for getting rid of surplus vehicles. And that is a part of the standard operating procedure that's on the checklist. And that is one thing that now we're going to have to handle in-house. Now, I know that doesn't seem like a lot, but keep in mind now we're taking away from what the private sector used to do for us at part of their fee or at no cost, and now we're moving some of these things in-house. Another one of those issues is we have to advertise properly in the legal section. It's not expensive. Ms. Hyde said yesterday it was about $20. Well, again, that's a part of what in the RFP process that we have with our surplus currently. And I understand that speaking with Mr. Baird about this yesterday, that one of the things that they really want to do is do the online portion of it. And I agree, that is something that's very important for us to add to the mix, if you will, to be able to see to it that we're getting the best bang for the taxpayers on the surplus. But one of the things that I don't know that we have to go this way to do it, because, Mr. Baird, if you remember, we offered that whenever we surplused all the equipment at the landfill. We offered the online bidding at that, and it did enhance the opportunity. So I guess ultimately at the end of the day, what I'm seeing is I'm seeing a little bit more out of our surplus side of it, it moving inside the government sector. A good example, when we did the surplus of the House, we had a county employee out there doing the showing. Well, I don't mean this in a bad way, but anything that the private sector can do, we ought to try to push it that way instead of having more and more of this done inside and more of this done by our purchasing department. So philosophically, I see it moving in the wrong direction, and therefore I'm going to vote against this based on several of those issues that I just laid out.
We really did this because a lot of governments are moving to this and getting rid of their surplus, and a lot of it's the small miscellaneous items, especially those, that they're basically junk to us, but someone needs that particular part. And what we also look at, looking out for the taxpayer, we don't pay a commission on this. What we do when they auction, they have to pay the commission on top of that. We don't pay it. The person who buys it pays it.
Right, like in the auction?
Yeah.
And that's the same way with this, though, isn't it? Yeah,
but someone factors in the price when they're doing that. So, that's what we looked at. But it's just moving forward because a lot of other governments have gone to this. We thought we should take a look and try it and see if we couldn't, generate better prices for this. It's mainly the small little items that aren't, in my understanding, is that usually aren't worth much that we think we could get rid of on this.
And from the standpoint as far as the auction, and keep in mind, y'all, I've done everything. I've done this. I've been on both sides of this, and yeah, three-legged desks, they just don't sell whether you have them online or not. And with that said, there is a commission, there is a buyer's premium paid on regardless of which one of these you go with. And the online component is something that we have used in the past, and all we'd have to do is request that, and it would be a part of the services. I guess I just want to back up and say that it looks like to me, from several of the things, we're starting to do more and more of this in-house. Whenever the best thing to do is, in my opinion, stay beyond reproach, stand in front of God and everybody, and let them bid. And if they want to do it online, in addition to that, that's fine. But with us showing properties for the sealed bid process, they're all effective. I'm not saying they're not, but just how much do we want to have do this in-house whenever, in theory, we're competing against the private sector? Is where philosophically I am with this.
Mr. Chairman, may I ask the Commissioner a question?
Absolutely. Or I would assume you'd be willing to answer it.
I'm basically with you on this. Do you think if we tabled this for a week, you could get with the county administrator and maybe give 2 or 3 changes or tweaks to it, which would address your concerns, but allow us to do some of that
I don't have a problem doing that. In fact, quite frankly, what I'd also like to do is perhaps just bring in the firm that has the RFP currently. And if there's some issues that we're having as a county, let's sit down with them and say, hey, this is what, I understand there's an issue as far as the timing. We had some vehicles that I understand got vandalized while they were sitting waiting for the process. And I understand that. And so, but at the same time, you have to have that critical mass to move it up to a point where you can really do a sale. You don't want to go out there and have a sale on 3 vehicles at a time, that you do that online. But yes, absolutely, I'd bring that forward and see if we can address some of the concerns that I have, as well as...
So if that was the motion, I'll second it.
So moved.
Okay, and just under the discussion, I understand what you're saying, Commissioner Davis, and I think you have a valid point, but at the same time, a lot of the things on this list is really minor little stuff that'll take more staff time to move around, and And if we just, there are two vehicles. I think you had a very good point about closing those titles out. You know, and so maybe instead of tabling it, if we just took the two vehicles out now, can we move forward with the rest of this miscellaneous stuff?
We probably could, but my concern is, again, now we're kind of setting policy and setting up the RFP, or engaging in the contract right now. And what I'd like to do is to make sure that that's not an issue. As far as the smalls, if that's the way you wanted to do it, is anything that wasn't titled, perhaps, you know, but I don't want to make that decision here, sitting right here today, without having thought through the.
And I agree. You know, we're not probably qualified to sell real estate. So if we have a house, we should, you know, use an expert. Your good point on the vehicles. I think we should handle those so we get a clear close out of the title, things like that. But
I agree with
this miscellaneous junk stuff. I don't
having
think it's worth our time to-
yeah, and the way you sell that at the auction is you go basically from me to here to the auctioneer, 100 yards down. Who wants all these desks?
Right.
I mean, it really does gum up the sale. So I understand what you're trying to get accomplished.
Okay.
But I think there may be a better way, or I just need a few concerns addressed. And by the way, none of this has been a surprise to staff or the county administrator. We spoke yesterday.
So we have a motion from Commissioner Davis, second by Commissioner Solari to table.
No, it was, I seconded his motion, which wasn't too articulate, I understand, but...
Mr. Chairman, could I?
And let me just, okay, so we have motion by Davis, second by Solari to table for 1 week?
Yes, sir.
Is that correct? Okay. Jason, yes.
Yeah, a couple things. I don't think staff would look at doing real property through this process. That would continue on. I also want to say we're not having any issue with the current auctioneer. We've been in contact with him and talked to him about this, and just wanted to say that in some cases staff would be doing less work. We've got in here some exercise equipment, whereas at a public outcry bid we've got to move that to wherever it's going to the fairgrounds or the sheriff's office. Here we would leave it in place, and the person that buys it would have the responsibility to come pick it up. And one of the concerns we have is the time that goes between these auctions, and we partner with the sheriff's office, the school board, the cities, and they're going more and more to online processes. So we're running into a situation where we think going forward there's going to be a harder time on these smaller items. They may be waiting longer and longer. Right now it might be 9, 10, 11 months between auctions. It may be longer with our partners kind of going the other direction. Yeah. So kind of getting that critical mass of little items is getting harder and harder as we move forward.
Sure.
So
okay. And just 1 week delay won't interfere with anything.
No.
We're good with that?
Absolutely.
Okay. And you mentioned the exercise equipment. I have it on good authority that Commissioner Davis is an expert in exercise equipment, so he might want to handle that.
You can tell
I'll delegate that.
Yeah, there you go.
Any other discussion, Commissioner?
No, it's just Commissioner Davis brought up the brass, and I think that was just one isolated instance where there was no time sensitivity to the product, and it actually brought in 4 or 5-fold of the value. They were just estimating on barrels of brass at the auction, whereas now we're getting true value, and I think it's truly helping out the range. With that in mind, Joe, was there any financial analysis done on the benefit of the
we could bring you that back.
Online service? I'd like to see that as well.
Well, see, with we've never done one before, so we won't know until we do this one, because we don't know what we're going to bring and these prices. Obviously, we've never done one. What we're just trying to do, we're trying to stay with the other organizations. A lot of jurisdictions and the other ones that partner with us have all moved to this, and we're just trying to remain consistent. I don't think we can obviously take automobiles off, anything with a title, and we definitely wouldn't do real estate through this. This is for I call it the miscellaneous junk that someone might need that we have.
Yeah, there's plenty of it.
And then it lays around, and there is a lot of, and Jason did make a good point, there's a lot of work when we carry all that, we take a lot of manpower to load it all up, carry it to 2 locations, move it again.
Line it up.
And then what doesn't sell, bring it back.
Throw it away.
Well, yeah, and that takes another 8 months.
I'd be hesitant having staff put a lot of work into this for something that might be $500 of value sitting here. I mean, we need to be reasonable here on this.
I agree.
Certainly.
Commissioner Davis, your motion to give it a week to settle out is a good motion, and we'll move
Thank you.
with that. So any further discussion? All in favor of the motion signify with aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? That carries unanimously. Commissioner Davis, item C.
I just need to abstain on that. The gentleman that brought this has his license hung with the same firm that, or the same broker that I have my auctioneer's license with.
Move approval of item C.
Second.
We have a motion from Commissioner Slurry, second by Commissioner Flesher. Any discussion? Seeing none, all in favor signify with aye.
Aye.
You can't say aye. You abstain.
Tell it. Have it.
So that passes by a vote of 4-0 with Commissioner Davis abstaining, and you will fill out the appropriate paperwork, I'm sure, Commissioner?
Yep.
Okay. Very good. That takes us through the consent agenda. There's no constitutional officer discussions, public items. There are no public hearings. We have under public discussion items a request to speak from Charlie Wilson of Impact Fee Consultants regarding asking the Commission to request school board to show cause why they should be allowed to continue to collect impact fees, request an opinion from the Florida Attorney General, and review affidavit to be signed by the Chief Financial Officer.
I think Ms. McKenzie, did it something we've already passed?
Consent to agenda question. It's just a housekeeping attorney question, if I could ask it.
Yeah, go ahead, Ms. McKenzie, but it would be good if you would come up before we vote on everything, okay?
That's fine. It didn't affect your voting. My name is Althea McKenzie, 2405 16th Avenue. I had a question for your county attorney. I noticed that on the meetings that you have, the consent to agenda are the only items that are not actually read out to the public. If someone was hearing impaired and was listening to an audio tape, how would they be able to understand what is being presented on the consent to agenda?
Probably online, Althea. That's how, I mean, I'm assuming that they would be able to have that access.
And is that protocol for public meetings? I just want to get a full understanding.
That's all I use anymore. I literally, the same access that the public has is what I use for my backup instead of getting the agenda printed out. And that's what I'm on right here in front of me. So I'm assuming, does that answer your question?
Not necessarily. If you were part of the public, this is the only part of your meetings that the individual items are only referred to by letters. The individual items are not discussed or addressed, and then there's a vote.
Right.
It's just consent to agenda, whatever it is.
Right.
Also, is there any obligation from the county commission to notify the public of the financial ramifications of what's in a consent to agenda item?
All the backup for every consent agenda, Mr. Chairman, if I'm okay, is online. I mean, that's how I knew to pull, what it was whenever I see and look through the backup and pull myself up to speed. And anybody can do that by going to, in fact, I requested from the county administrator that we specifically make it as easy as possible to access. And you just go to ircgov.com, and it'll say current agenda, to where that way, and it's the upper left, it's right easy to click on. And then it's just a PDF or an Adobe download, and all the backup that each one of us have is right there for the public to see.
Okay, so that's your obligation as far as what these items are, as far as notifying the public. And
actually, I think that's
them.
above and beyond what's legally required. I mean, legally required, we just advertise the agenda.
Thank you very much.
And Althea, there's a printed copy. There's a printed copy too of the, and you always get it, so I know. But that lists all the items, and also there's also printed. If you wanted to come up, we can also get one at our office to review.
And if there's an area that you think is not getting to, we're open. I mean, that's one thing that I think that every one of the commissioners up here holds near and dear is transparency as best we possibly can. And if there's any criticism anywhere about not being transparent enough, let us know. And I know for one, we were kind of got our feelings hurt whenever there was some website firm that didn't give us an A for something. But we asked what they needed more of, and we gave them more of it and got an A. So, we really do mean business whenever there's
So if there's an increase in budget one way or the other, then it just passes through the consent of agenda, and then it's not.
It can, yes. I'm not saying it can, but that doesn't or won't. But if you want it pulled, that's why we now say anybody can pull this. Feel free to. And so,
absolutely, I'm well aware of that process. I was just curious on that. Thank you very much.
I'll say just so you know, too, Mr. Beard's assistant, Dory, sends an email out with the agenda attached every Friday before the meeting. And then also, for those people that may not have internet or computer access or whatever, there is a full printed agenda and backup in the commission office upstairs where anybody can come in and ask to look through it, so that's available as well. So we do.
And
we
at the
do
libraries
try-
too? Don't we have this at the libraries? Or
we have
maybe
printed
just the
copies.
computers, yeah. Okay.
But the computers are available at the library. So that's available as well for those that wish it.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Bless you.
And to the chair, actually, to your point, is actually that what you stated is actually noted on an agenda. So we actually tell people when they're looking at the agenda, the full agenda is available online at the following website. The full agenda is also available for review at the Board of County Commissioners Office, the Indian River County Main Library, and the North County Library. So we specifically direct people to all the various different sources where places they could find this item.
Right. And I did want to clarify, too, the vast majority of the consent agenda items that do have county funds associated with it are usually already pre-approved budgeted items, like a road project is in our capital improvement element. We've approved it, and this is just actually now signing the contract to expend the funds. However, to Ms. McKenzie's point, if we do change the budget, if we increase the budget, that does show up as a miscellaneous budget amendment, where we do show what bucket of money those funds are coming from and where they're going. So we do try to have that, but it may be, and maybe just we'll think about this, and just maybe anytime there is a budget amendment, we'll just pull that for discussion and be more open about a budget amendment. And just again, to try to be as transparent as we can. I don't think that would delay our meetings very much, but I think to Ms. McKenzie's point, that might give us more transparency. So I'll try to remember to do that here as we move forward, if that's in agreement with the board.
Yep.
Now, Mr. Chairman, sometimes you really don't need to. In the case today, this is something that we've already talked about once, and we're going to talk about before we spend the money. This is really in the form of a bookkeeping error so that Jason can do his job.
That's
So
true.
I don't see this as substantive at all. It's basically formal, and I think that's the purpose of a consent agenda. So
Because we approved the all-aboard consultant last meeting, and now it's just bringing it into line about how we're going to pay for it.
process,
Yes.
and you know, some of this stuff is on the consent agenda
For a
simply
reason.
so it doesn't weigh us down.
Yeah.
I mean, if there's substance, sure, pull it, but if it's just form, leave it on the consent.
Okay. So, Mr. Wilson, I'm not going to read your entire introduction again, but we are to public discussion items, and you're up.
He wanted to hear it.
I know.
Yeah, come on. Charlie Wilson, P.O. Box 651114, Vero Beach, Florida. I'm glad we were talking about transparency, because the issue that I bring before you is not one to argue with you guys about. I give up on arguing with you guys about almost anything. It is a matter of transparency. Yeah, it's good news.
We're close, Charlie.
Good
We're
news.
getting there.
But it is a matter of transparency. If you'll recall, about a year ago, I came before this commission, and several times since then, with the discussion about whether you can continue to charge impact fees when you have surpassed the level of service and no foreseeable additional capacity was required in certain areas. I have to tell you that has led to a series of workshops and now a series of changes that are going to be coming before us later on this month. In most of the areas, I think I hate to. We have met with the staff. Thank you very much for sending the staff to meet with a group of us. And a couple of things came out of that meeting. One is, frankly, I'm getting about 90% of what I was asking for, because we've identified certain areas like libraries and so forth that really don't require continued collection of impact fees. And I appreciate that we're moving in that direction. We have a proposal that increases some, and I'm not sure that that's necessary, but we'll discuss that later on in this month when that comes up. I find myself in a bit of a quandary in that Impact Fee Consultants, the company that I own and operate, and has been operating more in St. Lucie County than here over the last year, is something at odds with my position as the president of the new Vero Beach Chamber of Commerce. Because my Impact Fee Consultant side tells me that the proposals are probably not legal, and they're probably not really workable if you get some sort of legal challenge. However, my Vero Beach Chamber of Commerce hat tells me that probably the thing that you're going to be voting on later on in April is probably good for business. Even though it's probably illegal, it's probably good for business. Especially in the city of Vero Beach, where there's more commercial than there is residential. Now, but that brings me to gathering that information took a great deal of time and a great deal of effort. But there's a couple of places where we weren't able to gather the information, particularly the school district. If you'll recall in our last meeting when the school district part came up, they had not responded, and so it was not included in the study. It was not included by the consultant, and the county administrator defended the school board, saying they were just too busy. Well, it's been almost a year since it first came up, and I've had correspondence with Carter Morrison over at the school district since September of 2013, so that's 7 months. It's been several months since the meeting before the county commission, and we have still yet to hear from the school board. So in the interest of transparency, because there are some difficulties with the schools, right now they have so far collected over $10 million in impact fees for schools. After the last however many years, I think it's 10 now, that we've been collecting that, we end up with less student stations than where we started. So the question becomes, how can you collect $10 million and end up smaller than you were when you began? Well, there's a couple of reasons. One is the impact of charter schools. Charter schools have filled out what would be some student stations in the school system, but there's a little problem there. Charter schools have not gotten a dime of impact fee money. Not a dime. Now, even though they are qualified to get impact fees, so we're collecting the school district of Indian River County. Now, I'm not against schools. Nobody's against schools. But the school district of Indian River County continues to collect authorized by you. Now, the problem is that the school district spends and accounts for the money, but it is authorized by the county commission. So the question is, does the county commission have the right to continue to charge impact fees, especially if they haven't heard from the school district in a formal way as to how those monies are spent, why they should be collected, and what the future holds? Now, what we have now is we have a cash balance. You have vacancies in the school where you've got empty student stations. I don't want to get deep into the numbers, but it's somewhere around 700 as far as I can tell. I can't get any information. There's a lady who's going to talk about public information. Public information from the school district is absolutely impossible to get. So the only way you're going to be able to do that is through the state's attorney's office or the courts, unless the county commission itself decides that they need this information. Now, you didn't get the information when you were considering the consultant's report. So my first question is, I would like to know if the county commission would like, and if not, why, they should not require the school district to come before you and prove that you should continue to collect impact fees. Because if there is no need, you should not collect them.
Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Davis?
Well, Charlie, we don't ask that of the city of Sebastian for their recreation impact fees, though. I mean, so in looking at I understand there's a whole lot more, of dollar worth of one than the other, but in looking at everybody the same, and I understand what you're saying, and I follow the logic process, because I kind of do wonder, if you have to use impact fees to increase capacity and we've got less capacity, then I follow that. I really think the most appropriate thing to be, though, would be to go to the school board and ask them if they want to continue to ask impact to continue collecting the impact fees. The answer is going to be yes. I understand that, but that's where, that's a totally elected body that's given powers by the Constitution of the state of Florida that I see more as an equal versus inferior or superior relationship.
Commissioner Davis, thank you for mentioning that. Two things. Number one is they have refused to do that. They don't put things on the agenda unless the superintendent wants it on the agenda, as you well know. The second thing is under Section 1009.4, use of funds for school facilities. It says, all funds collected from public education facility impact fees shall be used for the purpose of capital improvement to public education facilities under the jurisdiction of the School Board of Indian River County, Florida, and not for maintenance and operations. It is clear on its face that if you have less student stations than you started, then you cannot, and you have closed 2 schools and you still have open space.
No. A capital improvement, I'm not a CPA, but there's a definition of a capital improvement.
Yes, it is, and it is student stations.
It can be, but I don't know that I think a capital improvement has to do with how long the asset is good for or something.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's the life of the asset.
5 years?
Life, and usually is a material, there's a statute that says how much, and also the life of the asset.
And but what is that, Joe? Is it for it to be? For example, I think that we have the opportunity to call a fire engine a capital investment, right?
Yes.
And that's based on the lifespan of it being over 5 years.
Yes.
So do we use fire impact fees for that?
Yes, we've used optional sales tax.
Well, and I agree with it, but can we? I guess because I'm thinking of a bus. A bus should last longer than 5 years.
Commissioner Davis, here's an example. And I'm glad you brought that up, because here's an example. The charter school, Imagine Charter Schools, is placing a large building similar to the one at the sheriff's office over top of a basketball court. Okay. That is a capital improvement, and it could be used for impact fees could be used for that, but it's not. Because they're being collected by the school district. Now, the difference, I understand that they are a separate body. But here's the main difference, and the reason that I come to you, is the school board cannot assess an impact fee.
Right.
Only the county commission can assess the impact fee. Now, this came up in Brevard County. There is precedence. This came up in Brevard County. And politically, what happened was the county commission said that they weren't going to allow the school board to continue because they couldn't attest to that it was legal. And one of the provisions in the state statutes is that the chief financial officer of the county must file an affidavit to attest to its proper accounting. Now, there's some question about whether that means that's not a policy issue. That's whether it's been accounted for in and out of the proper place. But the fact is that this county commission is asked to authorize an impact fee. So the question is, do you want to know whether it's legal or not? Now, there's 2 ways to find that out. One way is to have somebody sue you in circuit court, which is very costly for both the sued person and you. There's another way, and that is simply to ask a question of the Attorney General of the state of Florida, which is of no cost to this county commission, to request that if, in fact, the continued collection of an impact fee when there is no their capital improvement program does not show that the need exists. And remember, the reason for an impact fee is you have to prove need and benefit. And my point is that I don't believe you can prove need. Now, that's a policy question, okay? But the fact is this county commission can simply they can find out whether it's legal or it's not legal. And I'll go along with whatever they say.
Commissioner Slurry, and then Zurich, and then
I think we should return and give them.
I will let Dylan just respond that way. Then I'd like to say something like that.
Just a quick comment to Mr. Wilson and to the board as a whole. The Attorney General has provided clear guidance to all the local governments who constantly, I was going to say badger, but request them of various informal and formal opinions, and their specific comment was, you don't bring us intergovernmental disputes unless all the parties to that dispute specifically requested of us. So the one thing that Mr. Wilson had requested, which was, hey, go to the Attorney General and see if they'll issue you a binding opinion or a legal opinion. I know what the Attorney General is going to say. They're going to say, we don't want to insert ourselves in, and I understand their position, into that type of dispute between the local governments. I just wanted the board to be aware of what the guidance I've reviewed from the Attorney General's office was.
And can I?
Yeah, I'm just something passed by that I'm just astounded about. So I just want to review it. I mean, this is one of those things where, the play has been made, but you got to review the tapes. But maybe I got this wrong, which is why I have to review the tapes. But what I heard.
I love this sports analogy.
Please go ahead, John Madden. Yeah.
Who won the game last
Yeah, who was the catcher?
Which game?
Yeah.
We were making such good progress.
It was on a wooden floor. Every once in a while I backslide.
Oh, my God.
But yeah, I guess we're just watching different games. I was trying to pay attention to the game before me today, and sometimes I think it is a game. But what I thought I heard was that the president of Impact Fee Consultants said what is being done is illegal, but that's okay with the president of the Vero Beach Chamber because it's good for business. Now, this is, to use a phrase I just heard a couple minutes ago, clear on its face, a blatant conflict of interest. And now I'll just ask a rhetorical question. Why would anybody join a chamber whose president says what it's doing is illegal? So that's just how I saw the play. I'm not asking for the biased position to explain the replay. I'll revisit the tapes, but that's what I heard. On its face, a clear conflict of interest, which he's promoting, and I'm astounded that somebody is making these statements at the dais. So,
Thank you, Commissioner Flynn. Commissioner Zork.
Well, Mr. Chairman, can I answer that? I mean, let's
let me
face
get
it.
Commissioner Zork here, please, Charlie.
Notwithstanding Mr. Solari's attack and misunderstanding of what was
Mr. Wilson, please.
Oh, I'm sorry, Mr. Reingold.
Hold on. I think if you look back, I was part of a case with Mid-Florida Home Builders, where we sued Osceola County over an impact fee collection. This is probably, I'm going to say, 10 years ago-ish, roughly. In that particular case, Mid-Florida was the winner of the suit, and it caused Osceola County and Osceola County School Board to repay tens of millions of dollars. I don't know the involvement did Osceola County, because they were the collector, got drug into it, even though the fee was set by Osceola County School Board? But we might want to look into that to make sure we don't have an exposure. I know in that particular case, it was very painful to the parties involved that had to pay that money back. Secondly, I'm pretty fluent on impact fees going back to 1985 when the traffic impact fee was $152, I think, give or take a few pennies. And
now that's a red light camera infraction.
And I remember saying to Peter Robinson, I said, that's really not that bad. And he says, wait, once they get their foot in the door, they grow. And he was, and then Larry Arnn, who now is a world-renowned, very good conservative speaker, came from Los Angeles to Vero Beach, and I met with him, and he told me about the fears of impact fees coming from California. This is 1984-85. I don't know how the school board, I would like to see an accounting of how they collect, what they've collected. Are they district-wise? Like we have 3 traffic impact fee districts. Is the school district when they collect their money, where do they have to spend it? What have they spent it on? My kids go to a charter school, and I know that they get by with a lot less because the school board doesn't share a good chunk of the revenue with them. And the charter school where my kids went, they paid impact fees for their school, but then they don't get eligible to dip into any of the impact fee money for any improvements at their school. It's kind of crazy. You pay. Now, county schools pay zero in impact fees. This particular charter paid about, I think, $300,000 roughly.
They wouldn't have paid education impact fees.
They would not have paid, and at that time they may, I don't know if they were in effect or not. Yeah. But they would have paid, they paid the other ones.
I mean, a commercial building doesn't pay education impact fees, therefore.
No, true, but they paid the other fees that we were collecting at the time. I would personally like to see how people come in, whether it's Mr. Wilson or others, and say, I'd like to see what was collected in this district for this particular schedule. And we have a pretty easy way of printing out a report of this is what we collected, this is the project that was spent on. And I like to ask the same for the school board, because I consider myself knowledgeable on the issue, except when it comes to the school board money. I don't know where it goes, how it gets spent, and I'm sure everything's probably in good order, but why don't they just show us what they've collected and what it was spent on and what their balances are. And I know that there has been a decrease in student stations because they've physically torn down one school. I know Dodgertown Elementary has a significant amount of capacity, at least it did the prior year school cycle. I've gone to the school board budget hearings, but I don't really ever see in their budget packet that they give out the accounting of what they collected in impact fees and where they spent it in their capital projects. So I think it would just be good to get it on the table to see how much they've received and where it's been and what's left over and what they're going to use that on.
Stan, did you have something to add to this?
Just a little bit. Stan Bowling, County Community Development Director. It's my understanding that school impact fees have been used only for permanent student stations, and that's what they've been used for. A couple of other comments. We can look at providing that information. I think Mr. Wilson's request kind of presupposes some things that we don't have before us, some facts, which would be part of a workshop that we will have when we get the facts. Information has been given by the school board staff to the consultant, and I think that when those facts are, the numbers are crunched and the the technical justification is done, legally defensible type of parameters for making policy decisions, we get input in a cooperative effort from the school board. We should have that at a workshop where we have school board staff represented, the consultant here, and we can go into those issues. But right now I think it's a bit premature because we don't have all the information. The school board doesn't, and you all don't yet from our consultant.
Well, I think we should be able to get what they've collected and what they've spent.
Certainly.
They should know what they did with the $10 million. Right. That should be pretty easy for them to give a simple account.
What input did our consultant reach out to?
We put our consultant, what happened is, and this is partly our fault, the consultant didn't have time to get with the school board because we rushed the whole process so that some commercial buildings that were going up could get the impact fee discount. So we put that ahead of the school board. Now our consultant is working with the school board. My understanding, they're fully cooperating, and we should be able to have that information to you. I would like to say I've got Mr. Wilson said that our impact fees are not legal. Well, we've hired someone who's got a law degree and specialized impact fees, and they definitely say it's legal. And when Mr. Wilson repeated it 3 times, so when he gets his law degree, I'll listen to him. But we are following the law. We've hired a professional that's one of the leading ones. And we feel very comfortable, and they do, that our impact fees are legal. I just want that clear.
Jason, did you have anything you wanted to add, or?
Yes, we do get information from the school board periodically on how they've spent the funds. We can provide that to you. As Dan said, it's been all for new student stations. Some of the things like Fellsmere Elementary expansion, Sebastian River High School expansion are some of the projects that it's been used for, and we can provide that to you.
Okay, thank you. And I guess one question I would have for Dylan is, I believe we have interlocal agreements that authorize us to collect the impact fee on behalf of the school district. So I guess one question I'd like to have you look at is, what really is our responsibility? It's kind of like, a retail outlet collects the 7% sales tax and remits it to the state. If somebody sues the state saying, you can't collect that sales tax, I don't think it's the merchant who's responsible. He's just doing what he's told to collect it and pass it on. And so I guess I'd just like some clarification with our interlocal agreements. What is our responsibility, and what are the limits of that, or what are the obligations of that going forward? If it's just strictly we're the collection agency based on what the school district tells us what they want collected, then I think this discussion falls back into the school board realm. However, if there is some legal oversight, and I don't know even if Mr. Smith might have any clue on this, but if we do have any legal oversight obligation, then I think that kind of changes our involvement. And I don't know if you're ready to answer that now or maybe next week, or...
I'd be happy to research and review our ILAs and get that information back to the board.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Chairman, may I,
Yes, Mr. Wilson.
Is it my turn?
Yes.
Thank you, sir. I appreciate it, and I appreciate your reference as a gentleman. I thank you so much. Notwithstanding Mr. Solari's personal attack or his discussion about his inaccurate reading of what I said earlier, the fact is that the presentation by the consultant included that there was no legal precedence for this new policy that they're doing. Now, having said that, I can't prove that it's legal, and I can't prove that it's not legal. And again, notwithstanding Mr. Barrett's snide comment about I do not have a law degree, I do know that half of all lawyers lose their cases. So when they go to court, because so half of the people with law degrees aren't right most of the time. So the big problem that we have here is that if you don't authorize this, if the county commission doesn't authorize it, the school board can't charge it. So it is on its face a function of the county commission and not the school board of whether or not you can do it for them. And so then that question is, if they don't review this, and it wasn't reviewed when everything started going into place, if you don't review the school district, then how long can you keep doing it just simply by not commenting? You know, the fact is that if one of the requirements of an impact fee is that it be with the latest and most local data. Okay, I don't think that you've looked to see if you have the latest data. As an example, the school board uses the fish corn or fish kind, I believe, as their source for population figures. Well, they estimated that there'd be 227,000 people. I believe, I have to look it up, but I think it was 227,000 people by the year 2020, which is what you're collecting for today, for the next 6 years. There's not going to be 227,000 people by the year 2020, according to the latest census. So the latest information is not being used. So my question is, one, do you wish to have the school board, and if they're going to do it at the workshop, fine. But number one is I believe that the school board, in the matter of transparency, should show cause to this commission, who's authorized to make an impact fee or not, as to why they should be allowed to continue to do impact fees when there is no discernible and clear future. Remember the whole thing about land banking was that it has to be definable and clear future. Okay. So my question...
Charlie, if I could just real quick. I don't disagree with kind of your overall point here that the school board does need to justify whether they need to continue to collecting the impact fee. I'm not disagreeing with you on that point.
That's all I'm asking.
I think the unclarity is the use of the word authorized. And that's why I asked the county attorney to look at our interlocals and determine if we are authorized to collect it on behalf of the school district, or if we authorize the impact fee as we have the fiscal responsibility. To me, that's the difference. Okay, and if our legal obligation is only that we're authorized to collect it on their behalf, that's a different story than if we, by that authorization, are now also blessing and guaranteeing it's proper. So I understand your point. I've asked the county attorney to look into that issue and provide that clarification. And hopefully next week, Dylan will have something back for us.
Well, notwithstanding the Sergeant of Arms discussion about the legal issues, the question about whether this is a legal issue between two governments, it is really a question about a legal issue involving impact fees, regardless of what government it would be, whether it would be the Mosquito Control Board or anybody else. You don't even have to name the school district. The question is whether the county commission, yours is a good question that could be added in that clarification. Number one, does the county commission authorize this, or are they authorized to do that? Your definition. The second question would be, are we authorized when we know or when we determine that the requirements of impact fees by state statute are not met? Are we required to continue to collect it? Are we not allowed to continue to collect it? What is our position as a county commission? It has nothing to do with you versus the school board. It has to do with your duties and impact fees, and whether impact fees can go forever. Once adopted, they can go forever without review, regardless of whether a need exists. And my point being that, in my opinion, and I'm not the only member of the Vero Beach Chamber of Commerce. My problem was I was trying to say that there are two sides of this issue that have not yet been determined. Some people in the chamber say, "Gosh, this is really good for business," and some people who are not quite as researched on the matter believe very strongly that it is not legal. Now, I understand that the only way I'm going to prove that is to go to court, and that's a pretty expensive thing. But it seems that the more prudent way of doing this in advance would simply be to ask the Attorney General what your duties are. And if you don't want to know, then I understand. But that's all I asked. I asked two things: that the school board be held accountable and transparent. And it looks like that. I hope that y'all will make that happen, either through the workshop or before you authorize that. And second is to clarify your legal requirements, because it simply is easier to clarify it with an Attorney General's request than it is through a circuit court action. And I appreciate your help, and thank you.
Charlie, and we will try to follow that and get that question answered for you. I do have to point out, and I don't need to see the instant replay tape, but early on in your discussion, you clearly said I. Mm-hmm. I put on my hat and do this, and then I put on my hat and do that. And just now you tried to throw somebody else under the bus saying, some people said this, some people said that. No, Charlie, I mean, that's why, you clearly said I.
Yes, I did.
I put on my hat. And now you're saying some unknown people. If you want to say I, then take responsibility for what you said.
I said.
Okay, don't throw it under somebody else. Say at least some mysterious people said this. You clearly said I.
Commissioner, I clearly understand your political point of view. The point is, and I'll do it again. So let me state it again. I personally have a problem, because I've come to find out that what I believe as an individual business person with impact fee consultants, I believe, I cannot prove it yet, I believe that it is illegal for you to do the alternative method that you have. It has not been proven in court, but I believe it is illegal. However, I am one member out of 77 now Chamber of Commerce members. I do not set what the board, and they haven't voted on it, but I sat through the presentation. And what I was saying is that the staff has presented this in such a way that I can see that there's two sides of this issue. And one side is that, frankly, if this is proven to be legal, is probably good for business, and on April, I probably will support their position. So it's not a matter of throwing anybody under the bus. What's probably going to happen is our Governmental Affairs Committee at the Vero Beach Chamber of Commerce will meet, having gone through this presentation by the staff, and it is my guess, good news, is that they probably will support your efforts. Now,
Mr. Chairman?
Commissioner Zork was first, and then Commissioner
Jason, can you bring what information you have on what's been collected and what they say they've spent it on?
Yes.
So is any of the J.A. Thompson maintenance facility fall under that? That's not student stations.
I don't think so. In my recollection, it's primarily been the expansion at Sebastian River High School and Fellsmere Elementary is what they've spent or committed those funds for.
And when they collect $1, it's a district dollar, so they can collect it in a house in Vero Highlands and spend it out at Fellsmere Elementary.
Theirs is countywide.
Okay.
Yes.
Can I say something? We're making a
Let me get Commissioner Sly.
All I can say is that the last comment by the speaker sounded more like the political spin of the commentator after the speech, which is why I'm glad we have the tape, because all you have to do is replay the tape. That is clear. So I just wanted to remind everybody, thank goodness we have a tape which we can view and actually hear the words as they were said in the context that they were said.
Thank you.
I just want to say that we're working with, and I checked yesterday I checked with the consultant. He says the school board is working very cooperatively with them, and we're making a few predetermined things. We don't know if they're actually going to ask us for what amount of impact fees, or if they're actually going to even collect impact fees anymore. That hasn't been determined, and when the consultant gets through them, so a lot of these questions will be answered. All I know is that talking to staff and the consultant, the school board is cooperating, and we'll get you the information. They're getting all the information. And another note is the school board gets audited every year by the audit firm, and if they were spending money inappropriately, I think that the audit firm would have an obligation to step up and say, you have to reclassify, you have to take it from another source of funds. That probably would occur.
So we have also run those expenditures past the consultant, and they've said they're okay with it.
So, Jason, you will bring us next week the expenditures and collections, please?
Yes.
And then, Dylan, if you would be so kind as to research the legal authorization and what that implies for the county?
Absolutely, we'll do so.
Mr. Zork, one of the things that, to answer part of your, I didn't want to get in the individual numbers. I was just asking for two things: to identify the legality and to see if you were going to make the school board account for itself. Right. If you're going to do both of those things, fine. But a lot of the money was spent to convert portables that were leased out at Fellsmere Elementary into permanent student stations. There was some question, so an auditor, as an example, as Mr. Baird points out, wouldn't know the policy decisions, wouldn't be involved in those policy decisions. It would really be more the accounting decisions. And as the staff members, when they came in, very graciously sat there, not just with the Vero Beach Chamber of Commerce, but with our attorney, Mr. Vosell, sat in on the meeting. When they did that, one of the questions, parts of the discussion was about the legality. And the staff's position, and I don't want to, they can speak, of course, for themselves, apparently much better than I do for Mr. Solari, that they said that theirs is not, they're not telling you that it's legal. What they're telling you is that they have a consultant that is telling you that it's legal. That the policy decision is that, just that. It is a policy decision by the county commission. So that's the difference. Is what I'm asking you for is not to argue about the numbers or argue about whether they did it right or they didn't. That'll be for another day. The two questions are: will you ask the school board to show cause as to why they should be able to continue? And number two, can you continue? Those are the only two questions, and I appreciate your help.
Last thing on something Jason mentioned, that they look at the expenditures on the capital side. I wonder who was watching on the capital expenditures for the school board when they built. I would deem it a personal car wash out at the J.A. Thompson Elementary, where it's not for washing school buses, it's not for washing large equipment. It is a 3-bay semi-automated car wash. Probably cost a few $100,000. Why does the school board need to spend money on things like that? So apparently you can get things through the expense side that when you look at it, and I had a constituent call me and said, hey, why don't you come out and see the car wash at the school board? And I said, we don't have anything to do with that. He said, no, why don't you come out and see it, to see that it exists? And I said, I cannot believe the school board would have a car wash at a facility. But sure enough, they do. And he was right.
Okay, Mr. Chairman, I don't want this to start turning into a school board bashing. Sure. Right. We're going a little off track, so I'd like to get us back onto the agenda if we could.
Yep.
Okay.
So thank you, Mr. Wilson.
Yeah, thanks a lot. I really enjoyed it. Appreciate it. Yeah.
Good. Thank you. Next is a request to speak from Randy Heimer regarding county cohesiveness.
I'd like to comment on Charlie Wilson's comment because you're doing a workshop regarding this, correct?
We will have an impact fee workshop once we have the information from the school district.
May I make a comment, sir?
Very briefly, please.
Okay. I'm in support of Mr. Wilson asking for his request for some level of accountability. When you spoke about the numbers, the fish numbers, one of the things that happened at the school district, which you also may need to put in the equation, is that the school district received $102 million over a 10-year period to ensure class size reduction and to do those portables. So if they're claiming to use those funds for those expansions, those funds have already been accounted for. In addition to the fact that the school board's population has gone down from 25,000 to 17,000, and that's been consistent over the years. So I think it's very reasonable to ask for smart spending practices, but also to make sure when you gather the data that you gather all the data, finding out what was spent where and for what and who and all that. That was my comment. Okay. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Heimler. Mr. Johnson.
Good morning, Commissioners. Good morning, attorneys. Good morning, Mr. County Manager. My name is Randy Heimler. I live at 2620 Little Eagle Lane, Southwest in Vero Beach. Actually, I came here last week, and I was very happy to see that you all supported Dr. Warrior's initiative to better the education for all the children in the district. As some of you know, I'm running for the school board, and I was really here because I was disappointed in the personal tax, and actually today was a great example of what goes on, and I don't think that betters anything for our community. I think there's a much better way of going about things than attacking the commissioners, and I just think it sets a very bad example for the rest of the public. And I happen to be a candidate for the school board, so I figured I would speak for a couple of minutes, and I appreciate Commissioner Davis's input last week. It was very informative, and all your inputs. But from what I'm gathering here, there seems to be an attack on the school system, which I don't quite understand, because I think we'd all be better off trying to further the education of our children and take the money away from for bettering their buildings and capital improvements. I just heard one example of a car wash, but I don't see what that has to do with the county commissioners. I think all this discussion should be at the school board and not in front of the county commissioners. There is a lot of misinformation from what I know personally that has gone back and forth in the last 2 meetings since I've been here that I'm not going to get into, because I just think that furthers the whole disconnect between the community and the commissioners and all the elected officials. I don't think attacking the elected officials here or at the school board or anywhere else does anybody any good. What I do like, though, is the positive attitude from the commission and from the county with the school system and all the other local municipalities, and I think that's the best way for us to go forward in the future. We all get along and we all work together. But I don't see honing in on one school system and asking them to come up with every single reason why they spend money because somebody wants to know whether it's legal or not, with the threat of a lawsuit and personally attacking, going after commissions and back and forth. I don't think it does anybody any good. Bringing up one specific item that the school system built, if they did build a car wash, here I don't see what the purpose of that is. It only just kind of puts out into the public that something is wrong with the school system, and I don't see that being a positive. Bringing in, and I have a lot of experience in the school system down in Miami, and the portables are disgusting. To be in a portable, I wouldn't want my son, who happens to be at Rosewood, in a portable getting his education. A lot of them are old, and they're decrepit, and they have mold and everything else, and that's not where we should be educating our children. So if the school system is bringing children out of the portables and putting them into permanent student stations, that would be a great thing. That can't be a bad thing. When I drive my son to school and I pass Citrus every morning, there's a whole slew of portables. That's not a good place for the kids to be being educated. When I was in Miami, they had been hit by the hurricanes. Those were the same portables that are still being used today, and they're being used at some of the local aftercares, and they're filled with mold and mildew, and the teachers get sick and the kids get sick. So if the school system is moving children out of portables and putting them in permanent student positions and stations and buildings, that's a great thing. So I don't want to go into too much because I could go on for quite a while, but I was very disappointed, or just now, sitting here and listening to some of the misinformation goes back and forth, and there was a number of $10 million thrown out there. I don't know how many years that $10 million was collected over, but if you take the impact fees away from the school system, and that's their only source basically of capital funds, and the school system does fund the charter schools here, it's mandated that some of the capital money goes through, then they have no source of collecting money at all. And they only collected from, and I did some research yesterday, this is not my forte by any means, but they only collected off residential development from what I understand. I read, and I try and do my research before I come in front of anybody. So it's very limited to what the impact fees would be in a county like this, because we don't have a lot of building right now. We have limited residential. They don't participate in the commercial part of it, which would be a much higher part of it. And I don't see the accounting being asked for from Parks and Recreation and, like they said, the city of Sebastian. So why the school system? Why try and take money away from the betterment of our children's education for the future? This is our future right here. So if you want to hold the school system accountable to every single thing they do, that I don't see the purpose in that. So I'm really hopeful, and I'm a positive guy and an optimistic guy, that I see less of the attacks and more of the ideas coming forward from the public, and more cohesiveness between everybody that lives in this county, because I see a lot of separate entities that don't work necessarily perfectly together, and that's really why I came here. And I appreciate what you guys did last week when you supported Dr. Worry and you wrote a letter of support. I think it's the right thing to do. Commissioner Davis, I appreciate your input and your experience. It was very enlightening to hear that your children actually had been reversed. That's enlightening, because you understand the situation, and that's what we really need to do. And Commissioner O'Brien, I think you hit on the right points. And if to pick one or 2 points maybe that you're not an expert in, and to hammer you on it, I don't think there's a positive. I think it's a negative. And what I just saw, the interaction just now between the speaker and the commission, I would like it to be much more professional without all the other things that go along with it. It would be so much better for us that sit in the public to watch this. We're all mortified out here. It's like we all gasp every time a shot goes back and forth. It's not a good thing. And if somebody has a good idea and a good plan, so be it. But it doesn't have to be with a caveat that there's going to be something else behind it. So I thank you guys for what you do. I appreciate everything you do, your dedication, and especially to the children. I mean, that's really what I'm here about. So thank you.
Great. Thank you, Mr. Heimer.
Thank you.
We're going to go ahead and take a 10-minute break at 10:30 here. Ms. Hunt, you'll be first up when we reconvene in 10 minutes, okay? And with that, we'll be back at 10:45. We will call the meeting back to order. At this time, the board, we had agreed to allow Mrs. Patricia Hunt to speak under public discussion items. Ms. Hunt, if you would like to come up. And Ms. Hunt, let me just, for your benefit here, I did meet with you, and you have a fairly long and evolved story.
I'll be quick, I promise.
If you could just give the board like one specific request, what you're looking for,
okay,
and just give us that, then we can see how we can help you with that specific request.
Okay.
Okay.
And this is my first time, and I want to thank each and every one of you for hearing me today. I greatly appreciate it from the bottom of my heart. With what I just heard, I'm not going to comment on, but my dad always used to say, you know, on our money it says under one nation under God, in God we trust. And as elected officials, people voted you in office obviously for a reason, because they trust you and because they know you're going to do the right thing. So with that being said, I greatly appreciate Commissioner O'Brien's open door. When I called, he saw me immediately. That I was very impressed with. And I, again, want to thank each and every one of you for hearing me today. I came to Indian River County, actually I came to Florida to go to flight school. Before the mortgage fraud and all that stuff got caught up, had to do with predatory lending with an FAA flight school. I had a slip and fall in a corporation at Ross Dress for Less. I didn't come here to be a lawyer. I didn't come here to be anything having to do with law. I never want to see another law book or courtroom. Unfortunately, I've had an attorney who was arrested. I have been through, all came highly recommended by the Florida Bar. With that being said, I have had my public information, and I know there's a public law now that says public information can be put out there in public. My dad died. His death certificate was put on the internet, violating his HIPAA laws. My mom doesn't even know this yet. My sister works for the Department of Justice in upstate New York. My other sister works for the Attorney General. I have the utmost authority. I have the utmost respect for people of authority. What I don't have respect for are dishonest people who are abusing their power. In the 5 years of this case that's been going on, I had attorneys who I trusted, who I thought were representing me in my best interest. Now that is up with the Florida Bar ACAB and the Supreme Court, which one of them is before right now. What I am having to deal with is myself and other individuals, including a VA vet who fought for this country, and that should mean something to the American people here, that have had court cases here in this courthouse, in this county courthouse, that have been violated the rights of access to public records. And these are our own public records. I didn't ask to go through 7 years of legal cases. Now I know the courthouse is short-staffed. I know there's a lot of different rules and laws that have changed. Online access. If you're a pro se litigant, you don't get online access. The computers are not working. And I'm sure Tallahassee meant, with all good rules, and I plan on going to Tallahassee to speak on this, I'm sure they meant this. I didn't plan on being a pro se attorney. I don't want to be an attorney. I came here to fly airplanes. Unfortunately, because I broke my back, injured my jaw and my wrist, and I have had to go through 8 years of healing. I've had the honor and privilege of meeting 2 Supreme Court judges who've flown into Vero Beach, U.S. Supreme Court Judge Scalia and U.S. Supreme Court Judge Sandra Day O'Connor. When I heard these Supreme Court judges speak at a private country club, which I was invited for, I've been trusted with families of federal and state judges around the United States. I've had custody of people's kids. I didn't come here for all this. I came here to fly. I have been blessed to meet some great families in this county and a lot of hard-working people. But when I go into a courthouse and I can't get access to my court records, and then I'm threatened by a lieutenant who's the director of that courthouse, and myself and other individuals on December 19th, or December 20th, 2012, sat and had a professional business meeting with the clerk of court asking for help with getting access to our public records. We were told everything would be handled, we would not have any more problems. I had a falsified trespassing threatened and literally filed against me. There were witnesses in this public building. I have been obstructed justice and violated, and federal laws, forget state laws,
Florida Rules 11901 and 11907. I've written the Office of Open Government. I've written the Attorney General. I've written the Governor's Office. I've contacted every person I can think of. Now I've contacted government officials that are out of the state of Florida because this is absolutely ridiculous what myself and other people have had to go through. Now I understand the courts are backed up because of all the illegal mortgages. And I understand the judges are overworked. Believe me, I sat in a courtroom and I couldn't believe all the stuff that these judges have had to deal with because of what's happened with our economy. And there's no quick fix to any of this. But we have a Constitution in the United States that my father and other people, women and men in this country fought for. And as far as I know, it still stands in play. That Constitution is supposed to mean something. People are supposed to have rights, not 5-minute trials, which are written on documents, not threatened and harassed by law enforcement. And when you file a complaint with the Sheriff's Department, and I didn't come here to take on this, my grandmother had a saying, you get more bees with honey than you do with vinegar. You can ask anybody in this town I have worked for, and I've worked for many families who fly into private country clubs here. I do not get trusted with people's children. I have literally been trusted with a troubled child whose father went to Afghanistan, high security clearance. I have a good, clean background. I don't appreciate a law enforcement officer who makes a threat against my reputation to give me a criminal record, which was witnessed. And those people will testify. It may not be in the state of Florida, but right now it's going to a much higher court. I'm to the point where I literally didn't ask for all this work. I came here, I wanted to fly airplanes, I wanted to go fly around the world and help children who were less fortunate in this country. That was my goal.
Let me try to get us to where the board can maybe help you. My understanding from my conversation with you is you're having what you said was an issue getting your court records.
Myself and other individuals, they have violated federal statute 1503, 5 U.S.C. 552, 18 U.S.C. 1512, 18 U.S.C. 1519, and one of the clerks had actually ripped evidence out of a court case file. Now, those are felonies, and I'm sorry. You know what? I've been threatened, and I had to leave this area. I moved after my accident out of state for a few years because I literally trusted an attorney who thought was handling it, and I needed to get some physical therapy and medical treatment. I didn't expect...
I just need to ask her a quick question. I don't understand what she's asking us to do.
I'm asking access to my public records without being threatened and harassed by Lieutenant Molinax and specific law enforcement officers and specific clerks, Clerk of Court Linda Beckford, who was the head of the Civil Division. Every other office in that building has been extremely professional and polite.
Mrs. Hunt, okay. After our discussion, I did have a conversation with the Clerk of Court. He has promised me that you will have full access to your records.
Without being harassed.
Without being harassed.
By law enforcement.
There's two caveats here. One is you cannot remove those records.
I know the laws. I'm not going to remove them. I wanted to look at them because there's court evidence in there that literally is going to a higher court that they have obstructed justice and they've altered records. And I've got evidence and witnesses to back this up. And I didn't come here to take on all these people. This is ridiculous of what myself and other people have had to deal with.
The clerk has assured me.
I'm sure he has because he's here and because this is on the TV now.
Okay. And so he has assured me that you will have access. If there is something that you need to take with you, you are allowed to request a copy be made of those records so that you can take the copy out of the courthouse with you.
I paid for copies on September 12th and asked for a clerk stamp certified of evidence, and I never got. I paid for the copies, and they refused to give me the stamp certified copies. This was evidence that's going to a federal court and a higher court, and I'm not the only one.
Okay.
So I just appreciate. There is a problem with public records here, and I would like to address it to the governor's office because there is definitely a problem.
I'm not sure about the death certificate. I don't know that...
It's a violation of HIPAA laws. My dad, what he died of was on literally somebody who apparently had an issue with this county, put stuff up on a public website, and along with some other things. I don't know if he was the person who did it or not. I don't know how it got public.
How long ago was that?
It was published about 3 months after my dad died on August 2012. And my dad's, what he died of was published violating HIPAA laws and my dad's Social Security number, along with my Social Security number. This is supposed to be private information. This is violation of people's rights.
If you do go down to read a file, because there's times whenever I need to read a file in the business that I do, and a lot of the information is public, but there's times whenever you have to
I've requested. We've done everything ethically.
Yeah.
We've done through the proper chain of command, and instead, I had a law enforcement officer who is in charge of that courthouse basically make a blatant threat and statement after we had the professional meeting with the clerk of court, along with the civil manager, who made threats to me and other individuals who sat at this meeting. We thought we'd handle it professionally, and we were told it was taken care of. That was back in 2012.
Okay, I'm just making sure that you know that they take time to redact that information before they post it on the public access?
Well, they had plenty of time. They had over 2 years, and that stuff was out in public where anyone could see it, and literally exposed my dad, what he died of, his death certificate, and my mother and my father's Social Security number. And I'm sorry, but you know what? It was a low blow, and it was disrespectful. And when I asked the clerk if she would please seal the documents, she told me she'd do it when she was damn good and ready. Now, have some respect for people who have passed, is all I'm asking. And have some respect. I have the utmost respect for law enforcement. And I know this official right here. I have the utmost respect. My sister works for the Department of Justice. She worked very hard to get there. And I have other family who work for the Attorney General. I have the utmost respect for law enforcement and people of authority when they are honest and they do their job. And I'm sorry, I'm not going to pull any punches. I have been through a horrible situation with this. I'm still dealing with medical issues because of this, and I'm not flying right now because of my medical issues. And what has happened in this courthouse is absolutely, it violates the Constitution, both Florida and federal. And I'm sorry, but it needs to be addressed. And I'm not the only one. There are a lot of people, including a VA vet, who served our country and had an illegal mortgage. And the senior judge in that case was kind enough to say, go outside and work something out. And then all of a sudden they came up with a Ford mortgage. I'm not going to get into the illegal mortgages, but I thank you guys for your time, and I greatly appreciate this. I just work too hard to have a good, clean record, and I work for a lot of families. I meet a lot of federal and state judges around the United States that come in here to country clubs at Johns Island and Windsor. I value people of authority. I don't value when they abuse their authority and they make threats to people. Okay. And I thank you all for your time very much.
Thank you, Ms. Hunt. Appreciate it. Dylan, if you would do the honors to read the public notice items, please.
I would be delighted. To the chair, to the commission, those in the audience and those watching at home, notice of scheduled public hearings for April 22nd, 2014. The first is a consideration of an ordinance for adopting the proposed new non-residential impact fee schedules for the unincorporated Indian River County and municipalities. This is legislative in nature. The second item is consideration of amendment of land development regulations, LDRs, section 973.04, section 973.06, and county code section 403.08 for nuisance abatement special assessment. This is legislative in nature. Both of these public hearings, again, are scheduled for April 22nd, 2014, and I turn it back over to the chair.
Thank you, Dylan. There's no county administrator matters, so under departmental matters, item A, community development, item 1, request for authorization to advertise for a request for proposals for an economic development positioning analysis and action plan. Memorandum dated March 31st, 2014. Good morning still, Mr. Bowling. Welcome.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Stan Bowling, County Community Development Director. I'd like to give a little bit of background information on this RFP and then hand it over to Helene Castletine. This has been a joint effort between the Chamber and staff. In terms of the positioning RFP that's before you all this morning, positioning is essentially looking to improve the county's competitive position with respect to economic development. It was initiated by the Economic Development Council, the EDC, and it was authorized by the board last November. And it is a joint effort between county staff and Indian River Chamber staff. In fact, Helene herself, drafted initially the document, and staff took a look at it, and I want to say that we've put it into the form of an RFP and come up with a detailed scope of services and brought it before you all this morning for your consideration. It does have the standard RFP structure. There's a detailed scope of services, which is in a chart that's attached to it. And I just want to highlight some of those activities in the scope of services, holding 2 leader stakeholder summits, a kickoff summit with input and a presentation and review of the draft plan at the end of the process, meeting number 2. The consultant would conduct surveys and analyze perceptions, strengths, and weaknesses of Indian River County and our economy in particular, assess our targeting of industries, and create an action plan for improving economic competitiveness, and also assess coordinating marketing and branding efforts. At the end of the process, the consultant would present to the Board of County Commissioners a draft final report, get your input, and then come back before you with a final report after that. The budget that's been approved so far for this effort is $75,000. And the RFP is structured to have the scope of activities broken down into phases and to have respondents break down the cost by phase and by task, so we can kind of keep track of that. The standard process that we're proposing here is to have, once, if you all approve this and it's once advertised, to give 30 days for responses. There would then be presentations by respondents and a selection committee ranking. You all would then, at one meeting, approve the ranking. There would be negotiations and then a contract approved by you all. We are shooting for the June 17th meeting, if you all move this forward, for contract approval and then work completed by the consultant. Right now, we're estimating that would be approximately May of 2015. The staff's recommendation and the recommendation of the EDC, who's looked at the RFP, is for you all to authorize staff to advertise it. And I'd like to hand things off to Helene Castletine, or any comments that she wants to make at this time, and then answer any questions that you all might have.
Good morning, Commissioners. Again, Helene Castletine, Economic Development Director with the Indian River County Chamber of Commerce, working very closely with Stan and his group in putting this together, developing the RFP as well as the scope of services. What we feel is that this will provide us information to show how Indian River County is perceived by business leaders, elected officials, our residents, but internally as well as externally. So nothing like this has ever been done in the past, and we think it's really important to, as we move forward in our economic development efforts, to have this in place. So if you have any questions, certainly I'd be happy to answer them. We would anticipate this process to probably take about 8 to 10 months. So it will bring us into the next fiscal year.
Okay, thank you. Gentlemen, any questions?
I have one, and I think can't wait for it to go out and see who comes back in on it and get this underway. On page, or number 185, where it has the 70 persons that I talked with Bill Shute back and forth a little bit about the input we'd like to get. As you and I went around to the municipalities, we said we wanted to include them. And I don't know how the 70 gets diced up. Do we say each municipality, we want to make sure that 2 members or 3 members from each municipality is part of the 70 interviewees? Or I don't know if there's been any that's more of an internal thing, not for the consultant to figure out, but for us to come up with some measure of, I probably come up with 20, but that would be hogging the list. But sure. I don't know, maybe if each of the commissioners might have a couple of people that, hey, this is somebody I think we should talk to, when you start looking at the number, how to break it up so we do sprinkle it around to the municipality so we get everybody's input from the interview process.
Right. Thank you, Commissioner Zork. Yes, certainly we do want input from the municipalities, and we made that very clear, Commissioner, when you and I made those presentations to each of the municipalities. And I think as we go down this road, I think that will be determined as to who those people could be.
Okay.
Helene, the only thing I had on that same page, 185, but the benchmark the county compared to the research coast, which is Martin and St. Lucie counties. Do we want to include Brevard County when they do the comparison to the north there? Is that?
We had talked about that, Stan and his group and I, and certainly this can be massaged. This is not something that's written in stone. This could be massaged. Certainly, in Indian River County, especially in North County, we do a lot of partnerships with Brevard County.
At least southern Brevard.
Right, exactly.
Melbourne Airport.
That was some of our discussion.
Right.
Melbourne South, not all the way up to
Right.
Yeah, and
to
I think
Cape.
good with Melbourne South. I think that'd be reasonable.
I think you're
We
correct.
can make that change and address that.
And the only other thing I had, it's not really part of the formal RFP, but on page 165, under the staff report, is there'll be a selection committee formed or appointed by the county administrator, currently proposed to be 2 county staff, a county chamber of commerce member that's not an EDC member, a Sebastian River Chamber of Commerce that's not a member of EDC, and 1 member from the EDC. And that was the wording put in by the attorney's office to make sure there's no sunshine law violations in this. But it created a little bit of confusion, so I don't think Mr. Baird has an issue or Dylan, but what I'd like to do is just change the Sebastian River Area Chamber of Commerce member to an at-large member that is not a member of the EDC, and then have the other categories. And that'll just clear up, again, trying to get it, make sure we don't violate the sunshine laws and stuff, but that'll clear that up a little bit. So Dylan, if you're, instead of a Sebastian River Area Chamber of Commerce member, strike that and just put an at-large member that is not a member of the EDC.
And that would be
That works for me.
Yeah, and that's fine. That would be a change to your page 173. We can make that change. And then on the scope, we can talk about Melbourne in that one task, and we can also be sure to mention municipalities in the other task.
Okay.
Oh, one thing, just a point on the Brevard. If you go from the Melbourne Airport south, you actually have the West Melbourne Economic Development Council, and you also have the Palm Bay Economic Development Council. So when you say Melbourne Airport South, does that include those 3, or just the Brevard entity that also covers and overlays?
No, we got to include Palm Bay in that.
I would think so.
Absolutely.
I mean, they and then West Melbourne.
I'm doing geographic.
A separate one separately from Melbourne's economic development.
Yeah.
And actually, I don't know what City of Melbourne does, but I know West Melbourne has something because I came across a video presentation initiative they were launching a while back.
South Brevard.
Just kind of
whoever it is.
Catch everybody south of there that would be that we would interact with.
I think I'd rather be more inclusive.
Yeah,
so.
Exactly.
Right.
Okay. So that's all I had. Commissioners, anything else? This is an action item, gentlemen.
I move to approve. Second. I'm excited about this.
With the changes as mentioned?
Yes, please.
Okay. Motion by Commissioner Davis, second from Commissioner Zork. Is there anyone from the public that wishes to comment on the proposal?
And I have one other question.
Yes, ma'am, please come up.
Briefly,
I can't hear you on TV land.
Sorry.
Your name and address,
Neil.
please.
I just think it's important that anybody with the chamber understand the impact of All Aboard Florida on property values and loss of business. So that might need to be a part of any study of how we're going to be positioned going forward.
Okay, thank you. Is there anyone else from the public that wishes to comment? Okay, seeing none, motion by...
Question. Did everybody, and I'm assuming everybody did, but look at the balance of, as we evaluate the firms, the percentage to each, their experience, their past, trying to find what page that's on again.
That's on page 172.
172.
172.
The experience of the project team in demonstrating understanding of the project, almost thought those could be interchanged. I'd rather make sure somebody has a great grasp of the project. It, to me, overweighs the resume of the team. I mean, it's only a 5-point difference. It's not. There's probably going to be clear winners.
Which number on 172?
On 172, where it's got criteria, experience of the project team, 30%.
All right.
Is a greater value than understanding the project. And to me, since this is kind of a unique item, I put a bigger emphasis on understanding what we're trying to really achieve versus the experience of the team.
So you just want to reverse those two?
I would, if anybody else has any comments or thoughts on it.
I don't mind. I don't have a dog in the hunt. If you want to, I'm good with it.
Okay.
Okay, so for the clerk and for Dylan, on page 172 of the backup, there's a evaluation criteria matrix. We are proposing to change experience of the project team from a 30% weighting to a 25% weighting, and demonstrated understanding of the project from a 25% weighting to a 30% weighting.
I'd just like to see if Helene or any else at the chamber has any comments on that, if they're okay with that.
All right, so the motion maker is good with that. The second is good with that?
Yes.
Okay. Anything further, gentlemen? Seeing none. Stan, are you good? I'm sorry.
Thank you. No, we're fine with all those changes.
Okay, good. All those in favor signify with aye.
Aye.
Is there any opposed? That carries unanimously. Thank you all.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Commissioners.
That moves us on to Public Works, item 1, resolutions for paving millings improvements and to set a public hearing for fourth place petition millings project from 66th Avenue to 1 block east of 63rd Avenue in the Pine Tree Park subdivision, units 2 and 3, Indian River County project number 1327. And good morning, Mr. Mora.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman and Commissioners. Chris Mora, Public Works Director for the county. I have with me today Michael Nixon. He is with the County Engineering Division. He's the engineer on this project. What you have before you on page 212 is the second millings project that we've looked at in the Pine Tree Park subdivision. This would actually be fourth place from 66th Avenue to a position just east of 63rd Avenue. So it's a little under a half a mile of millings. Last year we did the seventh place in Pine Tree Park in a very similar way, adding millings to what was a dirt road before. We had originally received a request from all of Pine Tree Park to do the entire subdivision. That kind of fell apart. They didn't get the petitions from all the residents to the level of 2/3 consensus, so they broke it down into smaller pieces, which is why we are looking at just fourth place right now. We received a valid petition showing 2/3 consensus based on the number of parcels and also based on front footage. What you have before you today is the first step in the process, which is to approve two resolutions. The first resolution is to agree to provide the millings, and then the second resolution will be to set the public hearing date in which the millings project will be considered and there'll be a public input. The total estimated project cost, which is shown on 213, is $109,171. 75% of that would be paid by the property owners, or $81,878. The county would pick up 25% of the cost, or $27,293, and that would be coming from the Road and Bridge petition paving account. So what we're asking today is a recommendation for three things: to, number one, adopt the resolution providing for the millings on fourth place between 66th and 63rd Avenues. Number two, allocate $27,293 from the Road and Bridge petition paving account to pick up the county's 25% of the project. And number three, to adopt a resolution setting the public hearing for May 20th, 2014 at 9:05 a.m.
Chris, just for clarification, I think all of us received an email this morning from a Mr. Chris Crawford opposing the project, and one of his criteria was that the person who gathered the petitions didn't have the full true cost of each assessment. If we move forward with staff recommendations, that public hearing would be the final go, no-go, and at this point we're just setting in process a public hearing where the residents can come in with the actual or close to enough actual cost and give us a final yay, nay to whether to move forward.
That's exactly right. The public hearing would set that time and date to gather public input. We actually have the assessment roll completed now, so we know how much each property owner along Fourth Place and along the affected side streets would be assessed.
We can present that to all the owners prior to the public hearing, so they have that.
Well, let me ask you this. And, what would be the possibility, or what would be the problem, I guess, before we move forward with any of this? go back to them now with a letter and say, okay, this is what it's going to cost you. Are you in, you're out? And then see how close or far we're away from the 66% that on this versus, I don't want to turn it into an applause meter of one side coming up here and speaking against it, the other side speaking for it, and then you have, red shirts on this side, white shirts on that side, and when we can really take care of this with first-class postage. I'm just throwing that out.
Yeah, I think that's something that we can do. I mean, we did receive a valid petition. Now, if some are having second thoughts, we could go back and revisit with them, and if it turns out that either based on the number of parcels or the front footage that we're no longer at that two-thirds threshold, then we could bring it back to the board and say, we're going to drop the project. But right now, we do have a valid petition that we've received.
And I do appreciate that and respect that. It's just now we have hard numbers to put in front of it.
Right.
And we didn't really have that the last time.
Right, and there have been some changes. We've noticed an uptick in the cost of millings. They've gone up. So based on
what was the estimate? Did we give them an estimate when we did that, or did we just ask them if they were in favor of it or not?
I think we did give them an estimate based on last year's project, which would have been with the cheaper millings.
Yeah.
But now we have a hard number. Mike can speak to that.
Is his mic on?
What I did do is I just sent a letter out in the last 3 weeks or so, giving them what their assessment would be, so they are aware of their costs now.
Okay.
Or at least the maximum it can go.
Okay.
If anything, it'll go down.
What was the spread of the initial estimate where we thought it might be and where it kind of ended up coming out? I know it's still subject to the actual bid coming in, but usually we're come in at, or I think the last one, which was lower cost, came in a little bit less than what the estimate was.
The estimate was $83,515 for the total cost of the project.
And now we're at 109.
I'm sorry, with total cost of the petitioners or the people to be assessed, the cost is about $170.
Right. What does that break down per parcel?
Excuse me?
Per resident?
I think for the typical small lot with 60 feet of frontage, it comes out to $900 and some dollars, wasn't it, Mike?
Right. On the average, that's about what it would be, which is a little bit higher than the other project, but the cost of millings right now is a little bit up there. But when we go to actually construct it, it may come down some.
Thank you.
Yeah, once we establish the assessment role, we would never charge them more than that, but the price could come down if we get a better price when we bid it.
So, Mike, when you sent the letter out with the updated cost, was the letter phrased, please respond yes or no, or did you just say, here it is, and it was open-ended?
It was more of a informational letter, just giving them, this is your front footage.
And I know there is a point at which we can, don't need to say, okay, do you really mean it? Do you really want it? Let us know. I get that, but
yeah, that's
I just
fear of.
I don't know.
Can you just redo the yes or no return vote with the new cost and do not the absentee ballot, but the...
Well, I think that we can reconnect with all of the residents. There's not that many to do, but remember, we don't poll them. They come to us with a petition.
Right, sure.
So they're telling us that we have a valid petition. We check the signatures, check the addresses, make sure that it's valid. We've done that.
Right.
But that doesn't mean we can't go back. If some people have changed their minds, that we couldn't go back and verify that we still have that two-thirds, and that's something.
Right. Sure. Yeah.
So I guess, Chris, what I'm hearing is I think the board would like you all to do that. Just go back and with the hard numbers and just reconfirm that they still have the desire to move forward.
Yes, we can do that. Now that they have that information, the actual cost number, it'd be the maximum cost, we can do that.
Okay, so that we're just okay tabling resolutions until y'all get back to us with that?
If that's the action the board wants to take. We had looked for the two resolutions today to set the public hearing. I think that would be the thing to do in case we go back and it's valid that we still have the two-thirds
then we keep
majority.
Moving forward.
Yeah, why don't we keep
Mr. Chairman, I think we need to keep moving forward with that.
Yeah.
I move staff's two recommendations.
Okay. I'm easy right now.
Yeah.
It's going to be lunch hour, I think.
It's getting easier.
I see a lot of 5-0s coming up.
A lot of nodding going on out there in the audience.
Again, staff is representing that we have 75.9% of the...
Commissioner, is that a motion for staff recommendation?
On two, yes.
Second, as discussed?
Okay. I think they were asking for three things: adopt the two resolutions and set a public hearing.
But we are sending out that letter as well.
Yes, but we're still
Okay,
moving
yes.
forward, setting the
Yes,
public
that's
hearing and
the third,
adopting
yes.
resolutions.
That was the second.
Okay, so just for clarification, the motion is all three staff recommendations. Okay?
And
setting the letter.
Inclusive of the letter as well, Mr. Chairman.
Right.
Thank you.
You guys clear on that?
Yes, sir.
Good. Dylan, are you clear on that?
Absolutely, sir.
All right. Motion by Commissioner Flesher, second by Commissioner Slurry. All in favor signify with aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? That carries unanimously. We added an emergency item under Public Works. Item 2 is the All Aboard Florida Passenger Rail Proposal Environmental Impact Statement Review. Mr. Moore, again, welcome.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. What you have before you in the additional item 12I2 is the All Aboard Florida Environmental Impact Statement Review. As you know, the All Aboard Florida high-speed rail, passenger rail service is in the engineering and design phase. Their current plans are to begin the actual corridor improvements, the hard construction improvements next year, with passenger operations scheduled to begin in 2016 tentatively. Because they are getting the FRA loan, they are subject to federal rules with regard to environmental assessments and environmental impact statements. They are preparing an environmental impact statement. We expect that to be submitted for review, public and agency review any day. Because it is such a comprehensive document, and because currently we're looking at a 45-day review period, unless it is extended as we've requested, we're going to need some assistance. So we've talked to CDM to give us some assistance with that EIS review. They've put together a work order to do that review under their current continuing engineering services contract with the county. They've provided us a not to exceed number of $23,542. We did you passed a budget amendment earlier which will cover that amount. So what we're asking today from the board is to approve this work order concept with CDM. Staff will, once we have that finished work order with CDM, we'll go ahead and issue that under their existing continuing services agreement, and we're asking the board to authorize that today for staff to do just that.
Okay. Any discussion, Commissioner?
Yes. I was at the city on another item, and this concept came up of them looking for a professional services side. The other municipalities may not have the benefit of a continuing work agreement with CDM like we do. Can we make this available if Sebastian and Vera want to somehow piggyback under us at their expense for their crossings?
We've actually included, there's 32 total crossings in the county. We've included all of them in this agreement.
Okay. Oh, great. So we
did take out the two DOT crossings because CDM is actually looking at those under a separate agreement with DOT, but we are including the city's crossings.
Okay. Are they aware of that?
We can let them know
Or
that.
probably let the rail commission in the city know, and then Sebastian.
Yeah, let the managers and the council know, because I believe, and you know, I read where in the paper where Phil's going up to Sebastian tonight. Is it? I'm not sure. Or tomorrow night? Is that correct? Tomorrow night?
Be tomorrow night.
Tomorrow night, Wednesday night. Yes. And when I read it, it almost like, and I know it's not the case, but almost like he was there to, you know, tout the benefits of All Aboard Florida. And so I know that's not the case, but I just want to say that publicly to let everybody know that he's going up there to try to answer questions versus as an ambassador for.
But we'll let the cities know that, and then we'll be sharing the results of the EIS review with them as well.
And Chris, the only thing I would add is maybe also call your counterparts in St. Lucie and Martin County, and just let them know what we're doing in case they want to piggyback with CDM or, you know, have the same company looking at this for all of us. At least they might get it. Consistent information. But
we'd be glad to do that.
I think just a phone call, say, hey, the board approved this, if you guys are interested, and
yes, sir,
they can go from there.
Also, I don't know what format, when the EIS comes out, if it's going to be, you know, a 500-page booklet, but if there's a way we can electronically link that to our website for the public to be able to read and see what's, if it's not too cumbersome, or if there's a way to reference to get to it, maybe it's going to be posted through, I don't know, I forget the name of the company doing it for all aboard Florida, but maybe there's an electronic way to link to that report so the public can look at it themselves?
Yeah, if not, we could always scan the document and put a link to it on our website and invite review from the public.
So if the first option is not available, that would be our backup to get it.
Sure.
Because again, with that short window, it's...
I know as with any federal document, there are rules about how to make it available to the public.
Okay.
And I think they make it very easy for people to do that. So
Okay,
we'll
good.
make sure that there's some way to do that.
Okay, any further discussion on this?
Nope.
Ms. Mayhill?
Nope.
Does this involve the safety issues at the crossings, or is this birds getting killed? I'm not sure what environmental impact actually reflects in this railroad system.
This will involve all impacts, social impacts, water quality, air quality, threatened species, just about any traffic safety type impact.
Effects on or around historical structures?
Then I think this is probably really an appropriate time to bring up this and, for the record, have everyone be aware of it. It's been written up in local papers recently. This is a report from the Federal Rail Administration's engineer who has studied the crossings from Miami through St. Lucie County and is planning to come this way and go north. But this report actually states on page 2 that in his professional opinion, he respectfully disagrees with the project's approach and that they are not exercising appropriate safety practices and reasonable care when designing the high-speed passenger rail service. And he goes on to explain that the Florida DOT has not commented on the closed corridor aspects because there's some nebulous reading of requirements versus regulation. But this gentleman, Mr. Fry, has really thrown what I think is a game changer into this whole process for all of us. I've said to you at other meetings who represents us in Tallahassee as far as Florida DOT goes. And I think that you need to be proactive at this point. I think you need to be talking to the Secretary of Transportation about what they're going to do. This gentleman from the Federal Rail Administration, who I hope has a secure position there, because I'm sure that he's not they're not happy campers about this. We know that the Department of Transportation wants to implement as many high-speed rail projects as it can while this administration oversees its operations. And so this has been probably a bit of a monkey wrench. I think you need to be saying, get this guy in here, get him to look at our crossings, because we all know at 110 miles an hour, this cannot be safe. He represents here that $47 million of security and safety improvements need to be done, and he outlines exactly at what crossing south of us, and that's what we need to know before anything goes forward on this project. And it appears that one might guess that there's another $47 million that's going to have to come out of somebody's pocket. At this point, he says that AAF does not want to pay this. So this is critical. If you would like a copy of his report,
yes,
I'll be happy to leave this.
Does that mean that this individual has already seen the
He did
EIS?
a field survey of every stop.
Right. So how would he know what's going to be in the EIS and how they're proposing to address it?
No, he doesn't know what's in the EIS.
Oh, okay.
He's just saying, right now, he's been told by FDOT and AAF what their intentions are for upgrades to the crossings. And he is saying they don't cut the mustard, and there's definitely danger ahead.
Okay.
Particularly, and this is important because we've talked about this before, you're going to have a double stack cargo freight train next to a speeding bullet at 110 miles an hour. And what he's talking about now is even the pass-through of those things and possible collapses onto cars nearby the intersections. So I'm hoping that you can, like I said, be proactive and start communicating maybe our MPO with FDOT. I'm sure they interface. We need to know, and we need to demand that they require that these safety features be implemented and that they not be paid for by us. Thank you.
And part of problem here is, I did read the article already, and it's kind of like from the very first Pirates of the Caribbean movie, and they're talking about the pirate code, and the one captain says, well, it's not really so much rules as guidelines. And that's the problem here, is the federal guy that Mrs. Mayhew referenced has kind of one interpretation of the, quote, guidelines, and All Aboard Florida has a different interpretation of the, quote, guidelines.
What a surprise.
So they resorted back to the Pirates Code of Ethics.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, but it is a goat rodeo. There's no doubt about that. So
I have seen one of those before.
Yeah. All right. So we have a staff recommendation for the award a continuing services contract to CDM for $23,542. Is there a motion to move this forward?
Approval. Second.
We have a motion from Commissioner Flesher, second from Commissioner Slurry. Any further discussion? Seeing none, all in favor signify with aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? That motion passes unanimously.
But also one thing, CDM has a Vero Beach office, so I know they're going to use some of the talent from their Orlando office, but it's nice that it's not just a national or regional recognized firm, but they also have a address right here we can go knock on their door if we have a question with them.
Yep.
And I really want to thank all the public. To spend this much time in bringing these things forward, because this could have, I know it probably wouldn't, but until it was really brought to our attention, it was a ho-hum event that I didn't give much thought about, but I really do appreciate the public bringing me up to speed on it. Thank you.
Okay. County Attorney's Matters, item A, sale of easement to Cumberland Farms, memorandum dated April 2nd, 2014. Good morning, Mr. DeBraw.
Good morning, Commissioners. Bill DeBraw on behalf of the County Attorney's Office. This is a proposed sale of an easement to Cumberland Farms at Oslo Road and 27th Avenue. You recall back a couple of years ago, we agreed to purchase the entire Cumberland Farms site under the threat of eminent domain. You can see, if I can get it up here, you can see on your monitors the Cumberland Farms site remaining. That's an 80-foot strip of property that fronts Oslo Road. There was an existing easement along the far eastern area that was 30 feet in width. To facilitate Cumberland Farms fuel tankers and other semi-delivery trucks, they would like to get an additional 9 feet to accommodate the larger size vehicles and also a sidewalk for access. So the agreement before you today proposes that that sale take place with the 757 square feet at a price of $25,000 to the county. This has been reviewed by staff. All are in approval with it. I believe Mr. Barquette is here with a representative from Cumberland Farms. If you have any questions, we'd be happy to try to answer.
I was just getting ready to move this thing forward until you mentioned Bruce Barquette was involved.
I'll move it, so move staff.
And I'll go second.
I do have some quick questions, if I could, because I talked to Mr. Coffey about this, but whenever he was alive, and a couple things. If I'm not mistaken, the county needed a little bit of property to the north of this site for some retention or something like that for future widening of 27th Avenue?
We had discussed possible purchase of one of the lots in the Rutz subdivision, the Rutz 27th Avenue Oslo Road subdivision. There are 2 vacant lots in there. We still haven't ruled out that possibility, but we're not actively
No, I get that, but here's the deal that I'm thinking about on this. And I mentioned this to Mr. Coffey. There was at least, I want to say at least 4 pumps already there, and then the convenience store. And the impact fees associated with the gas pumps as well as the convenience store and the land that we own, we paid for that, so we have those impact fees. They're fixing to sit there and go idle. There shouldn't be any reason why we can't work out with this developer, the property owner, of transferring whatever dirt they need to the south of us in this thing, and then take the impact fees, credit them for their the Cumberland Farms. What's that?
Get a cash value.
And then get that pond that we need to the north. Y'all see where I'm going with this? Mm-hmm. And so I don't know where that is, and I'm not trying to muddy the water if they don't want to. Let them open up and do business. But Derek, are you brokering this deal for them?
There you go. You
can transfer.
Drew Mr. Bucket out.
At a couple of different points while he's approaching. At a couple of different points, not only recently, but also when we were negotiating the purchase of the Cumberland Farms site for the Oslo Road improvements, we discussed possible property swaps, and it just never materialized.
All right, I don't want to shake the snow globe, but this screams opportunity for everybody.
Shake the snow globe. That's another one.
You never heard that one?
Sounds like crickets.
Don't they get cloudy when you do that?
Yes.
Bruce Barquette for Cumberland Farms. Mr. Davis, Cumberland Farms really needs to get shovels in the earth, so we really would like to move forward.
So, fine.
Thank you.
Okay. I have one question for
Yeah,
Mr.
that brings
DeBroglie.
up a good point, though. If we still own those impact fees,
Yep.
and if they want to move forward, they're going to have to pay the full impact fee load, right?
Yep.
Right.
Or am I missing something?
No, they should.
You're right on point.
That they should.
So they would have an incentive to try to.
Listen, in what I do, I try to add value without trying to do too much. So,
I got you. Commissioner Zork.
Because actually, on that topic, before I get to my other point, unless the adjoining property to the north uses those credits, unless I'm successful in the impact fee ordinance changes where you can make them transferable within a reasonable distance from where they currently reside, those impact fees will have zero value after, if Cumberland Farms moves forward on their own, they pay on their own, those impact fees become stranded and have no value to anybody. Obviously, we paid out the nose for them when we purchased that site.
yeah. Listen, I do not want to hold up the private.
No, I don't either.
If they want to strike a check to the county for impact fees, then the only thing I'd like to make clear is Charlie Wilson can't go after these. Sorry about that.
My other question.
I'm not sure how.
When we
That's entirely correct.
in the value that you came up with for that square footage, is that relative to what we paid for that property when we bought it? In other words, are we getting back? Are we charging them what we had?
Oh no, we bought Blue Sky an ongoing concern.
Well, I know.
I mean, so hey.
I mean, there's a point of being reasonable, but at some point,
We're only giving them an easement. I'm not sure you really want to open up the store.
Yeah, let's let the business.
Okay.
Yeah. So moved, if we didn't already.
We have a motion from Commissioner Slory, second by Commissioner Flesher. Any further discussion? Seeing none, all in favor signify with aye.
Aye.
Is there any opposed? That carries unanimously.
So in other words, now that it's voted, it might have been $100,000 for what we have in that piece of property for that little piece, right?
Could be.
But Bruce, maybe if you could carry back to them, if they are going to be paying impact fees, that we might entertain some proposal to work through those credits. That's something that works good for everybody, maybe.
The only problem we'd have to change our ordinance. It's not on the same piece of property, so that could really slow them up.
Yeah.
Or they can pay them and we can credit it back after we work out the paperwork. Again, we don't want to hold them up their progress.
Well, if they come to us and they want to try and work something out, we'll certainly entertain it. But otherwise, they're anxious to get building.
Let them go.
Plain and simple.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Well, we can always credit it back later if we work out a deal.
Right. And they get their money back and then use our credits.
That's right. Item B, block property conveyance to the Indian River Land Trust, memorandum dated March 28, 2014. Mr. DeBroglie.
Move staff recommendation.
We have a motion from the commissioner whose wife is in the audience waiting to go to lunch, which would be Commissioner Solari, seconded by Commissioner Flesher. Is there any discussion? Bill?
Mr. Grudens is here from the Land Trust. If he want to say a few words, if not, that's
We did make him sit here through all the whole day.
Thank you, Mr. Paul. Ken Grudens, Starflower Avenue, Sebastian, and Executive Director of the Indian River Land Trust. And it's been a pleasure being here this morning to catch up with all of you and all the business going on in the county.
Nobody ever says that.
Yeah, really.
And this is really a case of where there was a shaken snow globe, and we are trying to settle that snow down. The neighborhood adjoining these properties and at Hobart Landing was concerned about these properties being disposed of by the St. John's River Water Management District, and we were able to work out a wonderful situation where the property would come to the Land Trust to become part of our Tony Robinson waterfront trail system. So this would be sort of the piece in the puzzle between the bookends We're already essentially managing this for a trail system and working closely with the mosquito control district on the management as they are working on their mosquito impoundment. So we're pleased that, once again, we're in a partnership with the county that benefits the public and benefits the county and benefits the mission of the Land Trust. So thank you.
Thank you, Ken.
Any questions?
No. Y'all keep up the good work.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, motion by Commissioner Solari, second by Commissioner Fleischer. All in favor signify with aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Carries unanimously. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioners.
Item C is a Code Enforcement Board appointment, memorandum dated April 1st, 2014. Mr. Reingold.
To the Chair and to the Commission, thank you very much. There is a vacancy on the Code Enforcement Board, a member-at-large position. We've reviewed the completed applications, and there is one qualified applicant, David Myers II. With that, we've presented that to you, and we respectfully request that the Board of County Commissioners consider filling this vacancy with this one individual. With that, I turn it back over to the Chair.
Thank you, Dylan. Gentlemen?
Move your recommendation, Council.
We have a motion from Commissioner Fleischer. I'll second the motion. Is there any discussion? Is there anyone from the audience that wishes to speak?
Just real quick, I guess there's really no ginger way of kind of beating around this, but so I'm just going to ask. I appreciate the recommendation coming from the legal department, but these are counties. These are more of our committees,
right?
And I don't want to get into. I don't know how to say it. I don't feel like it was legal department to make the recommendation as much as it was.
But
there's only one, and we do have the requirements and that kind of stuff. I just don't want to. This is one very ho-hum, but if this were a planning and zoning or something like that, or I have seen back when I first got elected, those were charged positions and the appointments were coveted, and it was dog eat dog. And so I just don't want to get you in the middle of something that really is ours. And so I think it's just more semantic saying that we looked through it, all the resumes, there was one person that met the requirement, and this is the person.
Through the Chair to Commissioner Davis, I greatly appreciate that comment. I merely only suggested recommending this person because it was the only qualified person. In the normal instance, if there was more than one, we would simply state there were 3 qualified individuals, and to the Commission, we respectfully request that you pick someone and let us know. And it came from our office because back in 2011, the Board of County Commissioners specifically directed the County Attorney's Office to sort of manage several of the committees. And then we took it upon ourselves, obviously, therefore, then to present when there are vacancies or openings. But certainly to the point that Commissioner Davis stated, I do not mean for our office to make a judgment call on who's most appropriate. Our job is simply to serve as the gatekeeper in terms of who's qualified and then to move it on to the board for vote.
Mr. Chairman?
Commissioner Slaughter.
I'm with Commissioner Davis there. I think we just asked the attorney to just say there's one qualified candidate, and we'll move it and be done with it. And that avoids any problem like that in the future, and it's a problem he doesn't need.
Well, the clerk would have the minutes reflect that the motion is to approve the one qualified candidate for the code enforcement position.
Mr. Chairman, I'll be happy to rephrase that being presented with the background of the applicant and in appreciation of the careful review by our counsel, that I move forward the appointment of the one and only applicant on file.
Thank you. And my motion my second still stands. With that, we'll go ahead and call the question. All in favor signify with aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? That also passes unanimously. Item D is a resolution concerning All Aboard Florida, memorandum dated April 2nd, 2014. Mr. Reingold.
Thank you very much to the Chair and to the Commission. On April 1st, the Board of County Commissioners had directed the County Attorney's Office to draft a resolution to all donor governmental agencies. Essentially, this resolution had 2 components to it. The first was to require that All Aboard Florida, or at least request those agencies to require of All Aboard Florida, that All Aboard Florida pay for the full costs of this project. And that includes quiet zones, rail crossings, corridor improvements, and the like. The second aspect was to those donor agencies that are involved with All Aboard Florida that they specifically request that any of their assistance that they are providing, whether it be in the form of leases, loans, or the like, that they provided at the proper market rates. With that, the County Attorney's Office drafted this resolution for your review and recommends simply that you either approve it as is or approve it with any amendments. I would like to note that I would also be happy to send this to, I know first off I've included the Federal Rail Administration and the state of Florida, but currently there are 2 leases with the one with the Orlando County or the Orlando Orange County Expressway Authority and another lease with the Greater Orlando Aviation Authority, and I'd be happy to forward copies of this resolution onto those entities as well. And finally, I just want to clarify that certainly the County Attorney's Office would be willing to be the entity in the county that makes sure that this resolution gets out to all the appropriate authorities. With that, I turn it back over to the Chair.
Mr. Chairman, I'd be very happy to move this resolution with the wider dissemination that the County Attorney mentioned, and be happy for them to disseminate the resolution.
Second.
Okay.
Under discussion.
Motion from Commissioner Slory, second from Commissioner Davis. Under discussion, Commissioner Zork.
I've got a couple points to bring out. If we're trying to portray a resolution, I think we should include some things that I found through general searching and through some contacts that I made, where when we say, whereas it is now understood that the state of Florida is proposing to spend $215 million for a new rail station at the Orlando airport, in part that's true, but it's part of a new Terminal C construction that includes rail connections for the other 3 rail systems that will be in Orlando. It also includes a parking garage that will supplement the new gates at Terminal C. So the $215 million is not going to All Aboard Florida, if you want to say into their coffers, because All Aboard Florida will pay an annual lease of $2.8 million for the place where their train will stop. They'll pay $1.50 per person that gets onto the train, additional expenses that All Aboard Florida is paying at the airport, and all these have been in numerous references at fair market value. All Aboard Florida will ground lease for an additional $580,000 per year that they'll pay the airport authority. They'll also pay $12 million to the Beeline Express or the Expressway Authority in Orlando for additional improvements, plus a land lease of $275,000 a year. They're going to be paying out of All Aboard Florida funds, some which may be borrowed, $50 million for the rail maintenance facility in Orlando. So if you read the ordinance, sounds like on the whereas the 215, at best you need to divide it by 4. But the 215 is part of a $1.3 billion construction schedule over the next 5 years at Orlando Airport, of which All Aboard Florida will be a paying tenant. So I don't know if we're just trying to say what we're trying to accomplish is. I don't think that whereas it infers that they're getting $250 million to their personal benefit, where in fact they're paying a fair market lease, a gate stop, $2.8 million in rent, and $1.50 per passenger that gets on. So I think that's in a way a bit misleading, but depending on what message we're trying to send, maybe it's appropriate if we're trying to make it seem like they're getting a lot of things that aren't fair market value.
Well, one of the problems is we don't know what they're getting really yet, and we don't know what they're getting if they're getting it at fair market value.
Well, actually, if you go to the Orlando Airport construction schedule and their legal office, in their documents it says fair market value.
Well, again, but I'm not going to believe that until it's been vetted.
Okay.
So, but I mean, I'd be happy to change to serve All Aboard Florida which will benefit All Aboard Florida if you're worried about the
well, that might be more appropriate.
I mean, I'm happy
for wordsmithing, sure.
Because right in the beginning of that it says, which is also understood.
Right.
You know, we're careful not to say that we know this, and that's part of the problem.
Right.
Just as you just brought that up in the last week, I guess. You know, we're continually getting more and more information. This is, you know, the train is already sort of out the station, and we're running to catch up.
True. I agree. We are playing a little bit of a catch up, but I think in more instances, or I haven't found any instance whether they seem to be paying as they go for things. In other words, now, I know on the Expressway Authority specifically on their ground lease at the $275,000 a year, there's a point that it's made that that's the fair market value for the land times their applicable lease rate. So, and then there's some other references to that. So the wordsmithing change, I think that'll be appropriate. And more of just for a point of reference that I think people in our community don't realize, whether All Aboard Florida ever comes or not, Indian River County currently pays for crossing upgrade and repair, this is in the 13-14 budget, $405,000, licensing agreements $93,000, annual signal maintenance $77,000, annual right-of-way utility $21,000, so a grand total of $520,000. Whether the train comes or not, we're still paying for a lot of, and the reason we're paying those is because All Aboard Florida owns the right-of-way. They allow us to cross it. And for us getting the permission to cross it, we assume certain expenses that go along with those crossings. And I asked, and I don't know if you had a chance to find out, are all of our crossing agreements kind of in perpetuity, or do they ever expire?
To Commissioner Zork, you did state something that our office is kind of looking at, which was that All Aboard Florida owns the right-of-way. I think our crossing agreements are with Florida East Coast Railway LLC. And to your point, Commissioner Zork, I did take a look at it. One of the agreements I've pulled up, and most of them are very similar, is that this agreement is for an initial term of 1 year and shall continue in effect thereafter from year to year, subject to termination by the railway or county upon 60 days prior notice. So essentially the concept is it just automatically renews. And essentially what happens is upon the termination for any cause, the county's use of the crossing site as herein described, all rights of the county shall terminate, the county shall remove under their direction all of the crossing ability. So I just want to follow up with you on that, Commissioner Zork.
But with an additional rail and additional capacity, our maintenance costs most likely are going to go up considerably.
Yeah, maybe not double, but should.
They're going up considerably.
Yeah.
And on the flip side, once you have a new crossing, your cost for maintenance, and it's like when you buy a new car, the car is new, you don't have as much that you're spending on warranty, so it's hard to say what the long-term, you might have a low for a while, and then it's going to be higher than it currently is, it is today. One other thing, it's kind of a question to the commissioners as it kind of ties into the resolution, but not directly. If you were to guess how many people from Indian River County zip codes travel to the 4 airports served on the route on an annual basis, just a wild guess. These would be round-trip numbers. In other words, if you go to West Palm and get on a plane and you come back, how many tens of thousands of trips do you think Indian River County residents make a year?
I don't know, but help me understand why you're wanting to go.
Well, it's 152,000 trips a year are made by Indian River County residents to those airports. So there is potentially some benefit if there's ever a stop here down the road. That we have, that's 2011 numbers. Okay. That based on our zip codes, that's how many people leave Indian River County, get on a flight, and then come back. Which blew me away that the number was anywhere near that.
150,000 a year?
It's actually departures 76,310.
So half
times 2 because you go and then you come back.
Right, but I mean so that means about half the population annually
leaves and flies out of an airport.
Takes a trip.
Now some people fly. I have people that call me and say I fly every week.
Yeah.
And then you have some people that are the occasional flyers. But that was kind of a staggering number of how many people, and that's a zip code search that was done through the FAA, through the MPO, that there's actually somebody does ticket pulls and looks at where was the originating part of that passenger, where did he come from?
I'm glad I don't have that job.
So it is, there are people going to those areas, and if there's, in the future, if they ever come up with a cooperative agreement, a fair share, and they come here, that a number of those people probably could get to just the airport portion, not counting other people that go to other areas for things. But that was a very big number that I was surprised that it was that large. With that, I appreciate the motions.
With that, I'll amend the motion to, in the fourth whereas, change the words to serve to which will benefit.
Right.
And then just under discussion, the only concern I have is where we are referencing governmental assistance and the loans, infrastructure, or right-of-way must be at market rate. I've got a little concern with the loan part of that. First, these are already established legal loan programs that the federal government has established. So I don't feel 100% right saying that they can't take advantage of a legal loan out there. It'd be like telling somebody, you know, on your tax return you can deduct your home mortgage interest, but because we don't like what you're doing, we think you shouldn't be allowed to deduct your home mortgage interest.
Well, it sounds like what they do anyhow.
Well, my reasoning for this is...
Well, let me just walk through, okay? The infrastructure and right-of-way, I think that's entirely appropriate because those are additional deals that they've kind of created out of wheeling and dealing. So I think that's very appropriate to say not at less than market rate. But if there's an established low-interest loan program that's legal and they are meeting all the requirements to apply for that loan, I'm not comfortable telling them that, no, they can't apply for it and have it. Secondly, now we're nitpicking because I think INEOS receives some federal either grants or loans at a discount. And so now are we picking and choosing? And I agree, we may not like All Aboard Florida, but are we really going to get boiled down to now that we will support some companies getting a financial assistance from the federal government and other companies we're going to oppose that? I'm not comfortable with that either. And then finally, I guess, you know, I think this is such a long shot that it'll ever happen, but, you know, looking at what if it works? What if the Federal Railroad Association says, hey, you Indian County guys are onto something, you're right, we're going to triple the interest rate. And All Aboard Florida says, okay, well now we think private money becomes a cheaper alternative. They drop the loan application, and then the whole environmental impact statement then goes away.
Right.
And we now have no way to comment or get engaged. So, you know, for those reasons, you know, I'm good with the infrastructure, I'm good with the right-of-way, but I don't think the loan part is where we want to get into, and that's just my 2 cents worth. But
I've got one word change that might work for both sides. If it was potentially a $1.5 billion secured loan, then you're tying collateral to the borrowing, not affecting the rate. It's making sure they've got skin in the game and makes it become more of a you know, like Solyndra got a bunch of money and they walked away and the government gets nothing. If it's secured, it means they've got to post some assets or something as part of the process. And maybe that's a way to wordsmith it. I don't know.
Right, may I?
Sure.
Well, I had a conversation with that from probably the same public relations consultant that you had yesterday, and you couldn't get to the depth of what that collateral was. And the whole thing, you know, I didn't want to bring this up today, but when you try to figure out who owns what, for instance, All Aboard Florida Operations, which seems to be the company we're talking about, but we're not quite sure yet, owns nothing. All it has is an easement on the rail. And who owns All Aboard Florida Operations? Nobody knows yet. We haven't yet traced it back to, say, Florida East Coast Holdings. So I don't want to dance around any shell game of corporations, which it appears to be multiple corporations set up to get the maximum benefit every place they can, so that later Fortress can sell those companies off and make significant profits. So today I don't want to go down that rail. On the loan, my initial response to All Aboard Florida was based on what they told me, which was private company on private property on private project.
Right.
So now it keeps on shifting almost every day to something else, and the loan is part of that. If we had been aware of the loan earlier, then I, for one, might have started doing more due diligence earlier. So I want to leave the loan in there. One difference between it and INEOS is I don't see INEOS coming in and destroying the fabric of our community, which I believe this All Aboard Rail will. I mean, 32 trains going 110 miles an hour is not going to benefit our community. INEOS, at the very least, helps us reach the mandated 75% recycling requirement that we have. So I want to leave the loan in and put as much pressure on All Aboard Florida to do what they initially said, to be a private company on private tracks doing a private project.
And one more thing about INEOS, because I do get what you're talking about as far as the loans, and you got a good point there, but I think combined with what Commissioner Solari said, and I believe there's about 50 jobs out there right now.
Here in our town?
Yes.
That's
50 jobs at INEO, right? And I'm related to 3 of them, and there's 3 jobs. Yeah.
Again, I just think it points us now we're picking winners and losers and saying, you can apply for a legal loan, but we don't like you, so you can't. Well, I think it just puts us in an awkward spot.
Yeah. Regardless if they can figure out who the ownership is or who the collateral comes from, if somebody else posts the collateral for them, it's still secured. It's better to have a secured than an unsecured. But that's... For resolution purposes, probably doesn't really matter.
That's the bottom line. This isn't going to change anything. So,
Right.
So we do have a motion from Commissioner Solari, second by Commissioner Davis. Any further discussion?
I assume the small change requested or suggested
Yes.
by Commissioner Zork was incorporated as part of that.
I believe Commissioner Solari did restate to change serve to benefit.
Yeah, to change to serve to which will benefit.
Right. Which will benefit.
Thank you.
Okay. And the Commissioner Davis, your second is still good
Yes,
with
it
that?
is.
Okay. All in favor signify with aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? That carries unanimously. Commissioner items. Commissioner Bob Solari. You know, we had addressed this, but apparently you didn't hear it, Bob. Okay.
Maybe you can enlighten us or assist us.
It's getting close to lunchtime. I understand.
Let me put in my handy-dandy thing. A citizen came to me a couple weeks ago and said that she was an older person with hearing difficulties and was wondering if the county could add some hearing devices into the chamber like they have in different museums and such. It turns out that when I initially asked about it, the person I asked didn't know about it, but as I put my matters together, I was told by our personal assistants that we actually do have hearing devices in here. They look roughly like this, small boxes with a hearing piece, and we're going to suggest just adding one small phrase to the back page of the agenda item, which says things like people with disabilities should contact us. The phrase suggesting we add is, anyone who needs special accommodation with a hearing aid for this meeting may contact the Board of County Commission office at 772-226-1490 at least 24 hours in advance of the meeting. And we would make one of these handy-dandy devices available to them at the BCC, probably use a driver's license or credit card as just to hold the device, and after the meeting when they return it to the BCC office, their credit card or driver's license or whatever would be returned. So that is the proposal, if that's okay with the board.
Nice idea.
And if that, I don't know if we need a motion for this or if it's just consensus, Mr. Chairman.
I'm good with consensus.
I'm good with consensus. Thank you very much.
Okay.
So it'll look kind of like the UN with the people with their...
Yes.
Probably should have used a different group.
The second item that we added to the agenda under Commissioner Solari's matters was a draft letter for all aboard Florida. Commissioner Solari.
And this is just follows on really the resolution we just did, Mr. Chairman. And basically, my hope here is to just slow down some of the funding a little bit. This would be a letter to Senator Negron, which would also forward to the governor and Senator Mayfield, which just asks that the funding for the quiet zones and the Orlando station, and if the Orlando station is a big deal, I can pull that out, but basically be removed from the budget this year. And the reasons for that is because, basically, we know that there are a lot of known unknowns, but it seems like every day we're getting more unknown unknowns. And we had what Mrs. Meehill brought up today on the engineer study, and just reading one paragraph from a Palm Beach article related to that study. It says, Palm Beach reported Monday that the Federal Railroad Administration engineer recommended the higher level of safety improvements for the corridor north of 130th Street in West Palm Beach, where the trains could accelerate to 110 miles per hour. State standards are lower for rail corridors in Florida, but the high-speed rail doesn't currently exist in the state. So we have basically safety regulations that are meant for freight trains, but a high-speed rail coming. I don't know what that means yet, but before we start funding this, and before this goes too much further, I believe we need to try to catch up to the information which may or may not be available, and at least find out what information isn't available. So that is the purpose of the letter. I would like to get board support in sending it on.
Commissioner Solari, have you run this by Senator Negron's office yet?
Have I run it by Senator Negron's office? Not directly this letter yet, no.
Okay. I don't want to put Senator Negron in between a rock and a hard place, and here's why. When I was up in Tallahassee this year, I talked to a lot of the lobbyists, and if you remember last year's budget, the governor had a very, very sharp veto knife. And apparently a lot of projects that were going back to districts of the House and Senate leadership got axed. And if you remember last year, the Senate and House had approved a couple million for the lagoon, and the governor vetoed that. What I was told is that the governor was sending a message to the leadership that next year you better play ball my way, or the vetoes are coming out again. If you look at what's happened so far, the governor came out, and it's again election year, governor came out with wanting a $500 million tax cut for Floridians, and the Senate and House leadership kind of just jumped right in and has achieved that for the governor. So where we are now is Senator Negron has worked extremely hard to get a couple $1 million in the budget for Lake Okeechobee and Indian River Lagoon issues. I don't think we want to put Senator Negron in a position of saying, okay, Governor, and the governor put this 200 and something million in for the Orlando area. And again, I think the governor is looking at election year. He's looking at Orange County support, because as Commissioner Zork mentioned, this has multiple benefits for that area. I don't want us to put Senator Negron in a position that he's going to say, okay, Governor, we don't want to fund you $215 million, but please don't cut my $200 million. I think that's what's going to happen if we put Senator Negron in this position. My recommendation would be that we just send it directly to the governor, if that's your desire. I don't think the governor's going to change. And again, it's the reality of an election year. If you look at Martin, St. Lucie, and Indian River County, you have maybe 600,000 people that might be opposed to this. If you look down in Miami-Dade, Fort Lauderdale, Broward County, and Palm Beach County, you have about 6 million voters that are probably very supportive of this. And I think the governor is going to look at that, and in my mind, it's going to be a pretty easy decision for him.
Well, as I said,
but again, if you do want to send this, that's fine. But I would not recommend we send it to Senator Negron or anybody in the House side, because we would be putting them in a very untenable position given the political landscape up there.
At the start of my comments, I believe I said I'd take out the Orlando terminal and just leave it to the quiet zones, which I believe is something that Senator Negron is putting into the budget. So, understanding the...
That's true. He has put that match funding in there, so that was
And
one of his...
that would help. I didn't think of it in the terms that Commissioner O'Brien did, but I think that's...
And I understand that, and I don't like the idea of that type of horse trading, but I understand the reality of it.
Right.
Exactly. I don't either.
Which is why I said I'd take out the terminals. But my understanding is that initially, when Senator Negron was talking about this, he was trying to do more what many others said initially. Well, let's help to make it work with less pain. Right. And I don't think that's the direction this is going in or ought to go in at this point. So I'd be happy to take out any references to the proposed Orlando terminal and just leave the funding for the quiet zones at this time. Okay. And again, this isn't saying never, but there's so much information that we don't know. I feel it's irresponsible to saying that we want money this way or that way. Right. Okay. And I'm not sure that's...
And that's a lot better. I think that might put Senator Negron in a better position. So
if it's the board's okay, I'll take that letter out and go through it again to take out anything that may be related to the Orlando terminal or anything else. Ask it to be drafted for your signature, and then if you see any problem with it before you sign it, that's different from what we're talking about.
Mr. Chairman?
Yes, Commissioner Fletcher.
I'd like to just throw in, I agree with you in that statement regarding Senator Joe Negron, but I wanted to add that Congressman Posey's office is also looking for any and all input regarding this matter, as the funding request lobbies mechanisms have grown many tentacles, and they are crossing his bow lines as well. And I would wonder if the maker of this, I'd be happy to second if the maker of this document would like to include Congressman Posey's office as well, Congressman Posey being directly acknowledged.
Well, I'd be happy to actually set up a different letter for that based on the same concept, if that's okay, and I'll make sure that he gets a copy of the resolution, sure, as well as Patrick Murphy, who's Congressman to the south of us.
Right.
Just got a second.
Thank you, sir.
So this is under Commissioner Flurry's second item, motion by Commissioner Flurry.
And I'm not sure, Mr. Chairman, if you wanted me to sign it or you to sign it. With the removal of the Orlando terminal and just referring to the quiet zones, I'm perfectly happy to sign that. Second from Commissioner Flesher with the changes Commissioner Flurry has outlined in reference to the Orlando terminal, and drafting a second letter that would be more appropriate at the federal level to send to Congressman Posey and Murphy. And everybody good?
Thank you, sir.
Any discussion? Seeing none, all in favor signify with aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? That carries unanimously. Special districts, approval of the solid waste disposal district minutes of February 11, February 18, 2014.
So moved.
We have a motion from Commissioner Davis, seconded by Commissioner Flesher. All in favor signify with aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? That is carry 5-0. Item 3, work order number 1 to Kessler Consulting, Inc. for solid waste procurement services. This memorandum is dated March 29, 2014. Mr. Burke?
Move staff recommendation.
Second.
We have a motion from Commissioner Slurry, second from Commissioner Zork. Vinnie, is there anything we need to know, or can we move forward with the vote?
I'm here to answer any questions that may be available for the record. Utilities Director Vincent Burke.
Thank you. Are there any questions of Mr. Burke? Seeing none, all in favor signify with aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? That passes by a 5-0 vote. And gentlemen, if there be no further discussion, we will go ahead and adjourn.